My name is Brian Lin. I'm the Director of Editorial Content Strategy for EurekAlert. Welcome to the 2016 EurekAlert Public Information Officer Seminar here in Washington, D.C. I'd like to give a shout out to all of those who are joining us via webcast live, and thank you for those of you who have traveled to join us in person. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the EurekAlert team members. If I can ask EurekAlert staff members to stand up and wave. Please feel free to talk to them after the meeting. Now, 2016 has been a remarkable year for EurekAlert. We celebrated our 20th anniversary. We finally repatriated the EurekAlert Twitter handle at EurekAlert. And of course, there's that cyber attack in September. On behalf of everybody on our team, I'd like to thank our PIO and reporter registrants for being so patient and supportive during our outage, and for the many notes of encouragement you sent us during a very difficult time. We couldn't have done it without you. But we're not quite done with 2016 yet. We continue to make technical updates to our site to make it run more smoothly and more securely. We'll be conducting a reporter survey in order to better serve their needs and your needs. And we'll be announcing the most popular news releases of 2016 just before the Christmas holidays. So please stay tuned for more updates. Now, prior to joining EurekAlert, I was a press officer in Vancouver, Canada for 13 years. And while my main responsibility was facilitating earned coverage for the university, it became very clear that social media would play an increasingly large role in not only media coverage, but in our efforts to communicate scientific research to the public. Many of us have incorporated Facebook and Twitter into our media strategy, but new platforms and tools like Snapchat and Facebook Live are presenting new opportunities and challenges. For example, Snapchat now has 150 million daily active users, surpassing Twitter in just 4 years. It also has a tantalizing characteristic. 45% of its users are between the ages of 18 and 24. That's double the share of this age group than any other social media platform. And considering that this cohort consumes less traditional media, and for those of you working at universities and colleges, you know the importance of this demographic. Their engagement with science could have an enormous impact for our future. We're thrilled to have an excellent panel here today to offer their unique perspectives. We have Nancy Shute, co-editor of the Shots Health blog and reporter for NPR, Laz Gamio, graphics assignment editor at the Washington Post, Jessica Nadjunas, senior news video producer for BuzzFeed, Jason Townsend, deputy social media manager at NASA, and David Cameron, director of media relations for Harvard University. Now, our format will be each speaker will have about 15 minutes to offer their perspectives and take a couple of questions, and then we'll have approximately half an hour for Q&As. We will then take a 15-minute break and then come back for the pitch slam, and that will also offer some opportunities for you to interact with our speakers. As you know, we are live webcasting this session, so if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand and gesture to our mic runner. Larissa is in the back, and wait for the microphone before you speak so that our colleagues online can hear you. We'll also be relaying questions from the webcast, and if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag PIOSAM16 and the EurekAlert handle. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge Rockefeller University Press for supporting part of our out-of-town speakers' travel to BC. And I know you didn't come here to hear me, so without further ado, I'd like to give the talking stick to Nancy.
Brian, thank you so much, and thank you so much for getting us all here this afternoon, either in real life or via Pixel, and it's great to see a lot of people I know here in the room. I was thinking today about, I mean, my goodness, what a year it's been in social media, for good and for ill. And that got me thinking to where we were all at 10 years ago, in 2006. Who knows what the most popular social media platform was in 2006? Yes, it was MySpace. And where is MySpace now, I ask you? YouTube was 1 year old in 2006. Facebook was just barely edging out of its college roots, and it had started the news feed feature, which people weren't very happy about. They thought, why do I want my private life splashed all over Facebook? Boy, were they wrong. And Twitter began in 2006, which is dear to my heart. I adore Twitter. And at that time, I was the science and technology editor for U.S. News and World Report, which is still being printed on paper and mailed to millions of people around the nation. I mean, that's how we were communicating with our audiences. And I don't need to tell you that the media landscape has been completely transformed in the past 10 years. We just got some new numbers this week about NPR's reach, and it's about 85 million people monthly, but that's spread across the legacy broadcast shows, podcasts, which are huge and growing, the website, apps, and social media, which has just been a juggernaut for us, particularly since I spend most of my time on the digital side. I also do radio and some podcasting, but mostly digital. And then things that are kind of new hybrids, like how many of you have tried the NPR One app? Anybody a fan? I am. That's kind of like Pandora for audio, and it lets you click through and like or not like things that you hear from the shows and also podcasts, and then it curates it for you. And we are hoping to get more digital presence in there, including visuals and some of our online reporting, but at this point we would have to actually code every single one of those, so we aren't quite there yet. There's also been some really, I just want to shout out something that wasn't explicitly a science desk coverage item, but I thought was really an extraordinary experiment with digital journalism this year, which was NPR's real-time debate fact checker. Did anybody of you see or use that? The first debate drew 7 million views, which is in real time, which is, I think, the most people we've ever drawn for anything we've done. And it was a pretty amazing effort because there was actually a transcription service, an outside vendor, who was using voice recognition to port the transcript into NPR, into a Google Doc. And then we had a whole bunch of editors verifying that and correcting it so it was factually accurate. And then we had about anywhere from 14 to 20 reporters and editors annotating it in real time as it went along. So it was a complete high-wire act. We had no idea how it would work, and I think we all felt that it worked pretty well, and an example of some of the things you can do now with the capabilities that we all have to interact with people in real time and do journalism in real time. And I know we're going to hear some more about great experiments that NASA and other folks have done with real-time journalism. But it's pretty exciting. In my own little world, I've spent most of my time running the SHOTS blog. We have 3 blogs on the science desk right now. We have SHOTS, which is health and medicine, biomedicine, biomedical research. We have the SALT, which is food, ag, environment, culture. And then we have Goats and Soda, which is global health and development, which also includes a fair amount of culture. And then we also cover space, astronomy, physics, hard sciences, and we don't have a blog for them right now. They tend to go to our two-way news blog. And we also have a Tumblr called Skunk Bear, which does original videos, which are pretty fabulous. If you haven't seen them, I highly encourage you to do that. So for the blogs, we have about 8 million uniques a month, which is pretty robust considering we have 6 editors and then, assorted visuals peoples and things like that. One thing that really fascinates us and that we try to pay very close attention to is how do people come to us? How does our audience meet us? And right now that's phones. Phones. So about 55% of people come to us on their phones. about 9% on tablet, and 36% desktop. Our audience for the health blog is predominantly female and 20 to 40. And that's exciting to us because it's a very different demographic than for the broadcast shows, which tends to be over 50 and slightly more male. So if you're thinking about the news audience of the future, those under 40s are the ones we want to capture. And that's what we're looking at, thinking about who that audience is and what do they want to hear about science and medicine and how we can present that to them. And to do that, we are trying to be relentlessly multi-platform. It's a struggle because even though we're a national news organization, we're really tight on resources. And so we're always, our ambitions are always much bigger than our budget. But, such is life in the news business these days. But really, we've gotten to the point where a story can originate anywhere. It could be a member station radio report that then we decide that would be great for the blog. It could be original photography. We could commission photography. We could see a really beautiful piece of art that relates to science that's in a gallery in London, and we decide, let's interview the artist and do a slideshow about the art. It could be, charts that one of your researcher puts out there, and we said, oh, this is so cool. Why don't we just do this as a charticle? It could be embedded audio. There's lots of different ways that we can tell these stories, and we like to use them all. One of the things that we pay attention to is that about 30 to 40% of our traffic on a given day comes through Facebook. Google search is the next highest driver, but Facebook is obviously huge in our world. And that's both through NPR's Facebook page, where most all of our work is published. We are doing 3 to 5 things a day on Facebook Live throughout NPR, and a fair number of those are science, whether it's Joe Palca talking live to NASA scientists, or last week I had a really great discussion with one of our news reporters about long-acting contraceptives and the changing political situation and how that women are reacting to that. And we've also thought about creating private Facebook groups. Those have worked really well for NPR in some ways. There's a very successful one about personal finance. And we thought about whether it would be interesting to create a women's health private Facebook group, but haven't quite made that leap yet because we're not sure if we want to atomize our audience in that way, since it seems like people are very comfortable really getting engaged with these topics on Facebook and sharing and commenting. And it almost seems like the more controversial it is, the more willing they are to have these very animated, informed discussions on Facebook. And an interesting side note to that for 2016 is this is the year that NPR decided to kill the comments on its own webpage. And I was shocked at first when that came out, but then when I saw the data that just a tiny percentage of any of our audience were ever commenting, and the frequent commenters were even tinier still. So it really wasn't representative of the people who we want to talk with every day. And for better or for worse, I do feel like that's happening on social platforms. And so that's where we're trying to really invest our time and effort. We're also using YouTube for Skunk Bear, anything else we do that's video related. We spend a lot of time on Twitter. We have a main NPR Twitter feed. We have individual feeds for each of the blogs. They're semi-automated, and then each one of us is engaged in Twitter. We do use Snapchat. We don't use it extensively for science stories just because we're short on bandwidth for having somebody to do a lot of Snapchat. It can be fairly labor intensive, as you know if you've done it. And then Tumblr, and then also Tumblr. So we do have a separate social media team who we can call on to do things for us or work with us. And that's what I usually do if I want to do something on Snapchat, because they usually have somebody who's really conversant on that. So as you can see, we're trying to do a lot of different things. I've done a lot of work with the Invisibilia podcast and connecting their work to the Shots blog, and also doing original material that reflects what they're doing, and trying to create universes in these different platforms where people who are interested in NPR material and come to it in different ways. We found that Our audience really likes to read longer, more thoughtful pieces and engage with long form on the weekends. So we've moved further away from being short and bloggy on the weekends and doing long and thoughtful. So that's an interesting trend too that we've seen in the last year. That's not to say we don't do news. We love news. We love science news. We love doing interesting, short, or in-depth, or important, or fascinating or fun science news. So we're always open and up for that and love to hear about it. So what's working for us now? What's driving our coverage? Visuals, 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 visuals. You know, social is a visual medium. And we actually did some not super scientific research. It wasn't A/B testing, but we went through and looked at all the posts that we put up without original art, whether it was photography, illustrations, and ones that just went up with stock art or with no art at all. And we found that the pieces with original art got 162% more page views than stock art. So that persuaded us that it was really important to put the money and effort into good art and good visuals. And we persuaded the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who is one of our funders, to pony up some money dedicated to that. And as a result, we were able to hire a couple really good visuals editors for the science desk, who we work closely with. And you know, so we're commissioning. It's very much. It feels a lot like it did when I was an editor at U.S. News, actually, working on a 4-color magazine, because we have art meetings. We commission art. We send people out to do photojournalism. We do GIFs. We do animations. We do video. You know, we're doing, and some of these can be very involved projects that take quite a long time and substantial amount of money. So we're looking for great video, and that's where you guys can help. You know, a lot of your researchers are working with images all the time, and the better the images are, and the easier it is for us to get high quality, high-res images, the more likely we are to run your story, and the more likely it is to get good play, the more likely it is to get shared on social. You know, it's just going to work better all the way around. So I would really, really, really encourage you to think visually when you're thinking about how to tell the stories of what your scientists are up to. It's hard to believe, I know, but in this day and age, there are still major journals who do not go out of their way to try to make it easy for journalists to get their mitts on visuals, some of whom post on EurekAlert. And you know, it's not just think that they thought ahead to make sure that everything is on EurekAlert or on their own site. There's even some major journals where if you call them up and say, gosh, I would really love a high res of that photo that's in the journal coming out in 2 days, they just are not equipped to cope with that kind of, to respond to that kind of request, which just blows my mind. So please help us out with that. Another thing that is really important to us is data journalism. I think that the online fact check was a really good example of that, and how we can use facts and data to drive quality journalism. And what is better for data journalism than science, right? We love data. At this point, it used to be in the old days, you could just do a screen grab of a researcher's chart or ask them to send it, you know, and then we could kind of make it look a little bit prettier. But now, because the majority of our audience is on mobile and all the visuals have to be responsive, we can't do that anymore. It doesn't work. So what we need from your folks is to get their original data set so we can rebuild the chart. We have 2 really good data journalists, Allie Hurt and Katie Park, who are sitting there primed and ready to do that and ready to work with your scientists to make sure that's accurate. But we need the spreadsheets, we need the data sets in order to do that. And again, that can be, with some researchers and institutions, it's really super easy. We say, here's what we need, they go great, you know, 5 minutes later it's there. And in other cases, it's really difficult. And I know that scientists are very protective about their data, but we promise we won't do anything bad with it, and they will have control over it and be able to see what we did with it, and we'll make sure that it's accurate. But there are great stories to tell out there, and we now really have the capability to do that in a sophisticated way, and we would love to partner with you on that. So please think about, you know, even if you know you've got a project coming down the pike, where it's something that we might have conversations weeks or even months ahead of time and doing something really special with it, that would be terrific. We would love to hear about it. So we want to have those conversations. And then, of course, we still really need your scientists, and we need to be able to talk to them and engage with them. And particularly with being in a 24/7 digital news cycle. When I first got to US News and World Report, we were still getting all the journals, like paper embargoed version in the mail. Do you remember that? And there'd be like one person in the office who got the paper embargoed version of Science, and you're like, where is it? Where is it? Who's got it now? So in some ways, our jobs have gotten much, much easier because we can communicate quickly and easily electronically, but it's also gotten harder, and we really do have to do fast turnarounds on a lot of this stuff. So if I or one of my reporters or one of my freelancers is panicked and badgering you or your researchers, please be kind and patient with us and realize that we've just got to move fast on this stuff. We're trying really hard to do good work. We're trying really hard to be accurate. It's incredibly important to us. A lot of our material goes up online without having been copy edited. I wish that wasn't true, but it's just, we have like 2.5 copy editors to cover a really huge news organization 24/7, and that happens. So, our quality control is not as robust as I wish it would be, but that means we need to have even more help from you and your researchers in terms of making sure that we can double check things, double check the numbers, and really, get your help in making sure we're doing the best job we possibly can. So, what are the 3 big messages here? Visuals, high quality visuals. We'll be happy to work with you in advance on visuals, but we need them before the embargo lifts. Data, we would love to be working with you on database stories, so please think of that. And then, as ever, we really want to be able to spend time with your scientists and do justice to their work and their lives in research. So, anybody have a question?
My name is Dave Malmquist from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. Question I had was, you're talking about the wonderful charticles you can do, data visualizations. Do you have any information or a sense of how well those are actually understood by your target audiences? Because I've seen some things that they're really beautiful but they're very complex and seem to require a background in geography that I think a lot of Americans just don't have, based on the way that people ask directions, or when I ask directions somewhere, the blank stares you get. So I'm just curious about whether you have any feedback from your eyeballs about how much they're actually understanding these very visual, interactive data graphics.
Yeah, I think Laz is going to have things to say about that too, but I think we are totally focused on our audience, and we have no problem telling a scientist that, like, dude, I know this is the result of your life's work, but there's no way that mere mortals have the time or bandwidth to really figure out what you're saying here. So we look to see, how we tell that for an informed but busy general public, so that it's clear. And that's why it's really great to have data journalists on staff, because sometimes I'll get all excited and geeked out about something, and they'll look at it and they go, "Are you kidding me, Nancy? There's no way this could ever be a chart that people would understand." So I feel like it's an active translation between what the researcher has and what I get excited about as an editor, and then the data journalist saying, we really have a good sense of what is and isn't going to work for our audience. Let's see what we could do with that. I mean, sometimes we get complex. Sometimes it's, state-by-state data on, something, smoking rates or something, and, they will do, we just did one last week, with multiple maps showing various trends. And did everybody look at all those maps? I doubt it, but maybe they looked at one, maybe they looked at two. Each map was giving them an individual chunk of information that was very clear and succinct. And if they looked at all of them, they got a broader story, but any one of those maps was giving them a complete nugget of information that I think could be clearly understood from that. So it's hard. I mean, it is really hard, especially with the kind of complex stuff that you folks are dealing with day in and day out. But, I mean, that's the challenge, that's the fun of it, and trying to figure out how to do that.
Can we take a question from online, please?
We got a question. We have a question from Julie, Kiefer University of Utah. When you talk about needing data for database stories, can you give an example of what do you mean and what kind of data we could help provide?
Oh, that's a good story. Well, it could be trend data. It could be, you know, HIV rates in different populations and how that's changing over time. It could be state-by-state epidemiological data on Medicaid funding. It could be, you know, how many people are covered under Obamacare state by state or under Medicaid. We have been doing a lot of coverage of healthcare in the last month, and it's just going to keep on going. So, you know, those are very complex issues where graphics can be extremely helpful. Even classic ones are climate trend information. Maybe it's marine mammal populations, or maybe it's trends in the sorts of, you know, research that's being published in a particular, you know, but I'm just thinking there's so many different ways you could look at it, and the issue, whatever issue your institution or your researchers are looking in a way that would be illuminating for people. And I would encourage you for ideas, you know, look at the Washington Post, look at the New York Times, look at BuzzFeed, look at 538, look at a bunch of sites that have been doing really, Vox is doing some really great stuff with data journalism, and look and see how they pick topics and how they present it. It doesn't necessarily need to be a science topic to give you good ideas about what to do with data journalism, but just to say, wow, I really like how they did that. Could I use that format for a topic that we're really trying to get across? And you always need to sing, you know, just like, you know, in headline school, back in journalism school, they always said, you know, your headline has to have a subject and a verb and an object. Like somebody has to be doing something to make it a story, right? And that's the same with your data journalism. It has to be telling a story that people can grasp and be interested in. So I would say think about what story you can tell in that, with that data and that image.
I think that's a great segue to our next speaker, Laz.
Want me to? How do you do this? All right, I should do it. So I guess everybody knows my name, but I'm Laz. I'm a graphics assignment editor at the Post. We make all sorts of crazy maps, data viz. We just try to break the internet every day. Sometimes we do really good, other times not so much. So my presentation today is I'm going to tell you a story about something I learned, and I think that would make a lot of sense for, you know, science communicators. I'm going to share a thought about, you know, social media and data viz and, you know, how that relates to each other. And then the small plea really is just to beg you for data. I'll take anything you have on your computer, honestly. So this is some of the graphics team. Kat Downs is our director. And you can tell we're a graphics team because we all wore colors for the Olympics and matched. I was not there. I was working from home that day. But, you know, we like to organize and sort. And, you know, some of the work we do, it ranges from, you know, stuff like this, which is, you know, this is a part of an interactive of the new African American History and Culture Museum that opened. So we have people who are very talented at modeling. We publish this bivariate map, which is kind of difficult to understand, but it's awesome. You know, so we have people who do a lot of really crazy data work and cartography. Then I did this for the election, which, you know, we went completely crazy. We rotated the United States. We printed 2 maps side by side on a double truck and made little mountains. It was really fun. Then we have this, which is, Trump essentially won the election in 3 states by like 100,000 votes. Now it's 80,000. So these are sort of like the crazy graphics we do, right? We try to push the envelope we try new techniques, and I think somebody had a comment, how many people get it? Probably not that many. That's why we have to label everything really well. When people think graphics, this is what they want, right? They want little bars going up or to the side or down. So it's hard, right? So I guess the parallel here is that it's really difficult to communicate these these complex ideas well. So this is the story. So debate night, remember debates before Trump was president? So this is the first debate. We were all stress eating, chips, watching it in a glass chamber of emotion. And we started noticing that, we had this great split screen from C-SPAN, and we were just noticing that Trump, gesticulates and moves around a lot, while Clinton is very like, okay, she stays there, and she, says what she's gonna say. So I was like, hey, what would happen if we do something with it? So with Python, I was playing around at 1 in the morning, and I extracted every video frame from the entire debate and superimposed them on top of each other, right? This is like art, practically. Nobody understands this. This says absolutely nothing. In fact, a friend of mine's, why did you do this? Because you can, all right? Why do we do anything? So then, I kept playing around. I'm pretty sure this gave people some nightmares. But again, why not? Slowly I convinced one of my coworkers to write an article with me. Essentially, we just took this crazy idea and made something with it. And we made these sort of, this sort of plot. I don't even know what to call this. We're never going to do it again. It didn't work, so it's fine. So we took, I don't even know what it means, and I made it. So that should tell you enough about it. So each Trump head is 1 minute of footage. I think it's maybe 1 a second, superimposed on top of each other. So it shows you how he moves and how he sort of like gets angry when he talks about some sort of stuff. I had a lot of fun making this, but readers did not love him. So, Earl Pickles did not get his clickback, just letting you know. And hummus, I'll try better next time, man. So, what a bummer, right? It was a bummer, But, the lesson here is, I made this for myself, right? Which sometimes we do this. It's a passion project, right? You want to do something interesting for yourself, But then we had this great comment, actually, which, set Kevin and I on the right track, right? It's like, unless this is based on something, right? You guys are just playing around, right? So we lined it up for next time. I was still messing around on Twitter, though. So we found 2 body language experts, and we lined them up for the second debate, which people were going to move around. I guess Trump and Clinton were going to move around, so we had something, we planned for it this time. We didn't, start it at 1 in the morning also. So we took a second shot, right? We did this really interesting photo viz. It was the most shared graphic of the year for our department, mostly because we did our homework, right? So, we did this sort of stuff where we used the same video technique where we extracted different frames and we composed them to show sort of like key moments of the debate, right? They didn't shake hands at this one because the first one was a little testy. And then we interspersed, different sort of, this is that famous like looming, scene in the second debate. So then, we paired that with, comments from the experts, these 2 body language experts who were telling us, like, this is a great quote actually here. He circles her during her turn. He is like a lion. You can't make it up. It's awesome. So, okay, so this is the moral of the story here. Know who you're making stuff for, right? Our mistake here was I just wanted to nerd out and make something for people who are nerds. Not everybody is like that, right? And if you mess up, just try again, honestly. How does it apply for you? You send it a release and it doesn't really get a lot of traction, send it again and tweak little things that you think will make it better. And I guess this didn't update, but it's fine. But there's magic in sort of just making this insane stuff digestible for people who don't share your same headspace. All right, So, and this is my thought about social media. Just make stuff for social media, right? A lot of the times we make promos or GIFs to link back to our websites. Just put something on Twitter. Just make something for Twitter and for people who are on Twitter. You know, we use Twitter all the time in our graphics department. Usually we make these like really nice GIFs to try to trick people to click on our graphic, right? But so everybody else does that. You know, people are used to that. You know, there's a lot of different approaches. You know, this is how I imagine people reading Twitter. Very frustrated. So this is Dahlia Lee's work. I think she's at AJ Plus. She has this great idea. She calls them infogriffs. Essentially, it's a little story told through charts that just maybe 1, 2, or 3 frames. They cycle through. They don't link to anything. They just tell you a story. It's perfect for Snapchat, perfect for whatever you want to put stuff on. This is something Dawn did. She's now working at Reuters in Singapore. So it was just so simple. Essentially, I can't embed tweets in this thing, so imagine it moving. You know, it's like, you know, this ingredients for ramen, and then she labels them sort of like diagrammatically on top. This didn't, you know, this linked to something which, you know, kind of disproves my point. But it's a beautiful thing that just exists in social media. That's it. It's the only thing it's going to do. And then, you know, for example, that crazy map I showed you before, one of my coworkers, Emily Yunt, she turned it into a Twitter moment, right? So it's not just, you know, you could also do it the other way around, right? You could have an article or a release and put it in social media in another way, but natively. All right, so takeaways. The people who read your site are not necessarily the people who read, you know, who are on your email list, and, you know, they're not necessarily the people on Twitter. So different people are on different platforms. Think about how to reach them where they are. You know, and a one-size-fits-all solution sometimes isn't the best way to go. All right, the plea, give me everything on your computer. So as far as data, what data is good? If it's on a computer, it's good. Anything. You know, this is my face anytime anybody sends me a CSV, all right? And I'm pretty sure everybody feels the same way, all right? Just send everything. People in graphics teams, you know, the New York Times, Washington Post, I'm sure NPR, we just love it, all right? And we know how to use it. So, you know, we're a captive audience for this type of stuff, especially now the graphics desks are doing a lot more reporting. You know, like, we're nerds. Just give us the stuff. It's like nerd to nerd. It's perfect. Yeah, and then just put it in front of us. So this is a good example of a graphic. I'm not sure if there's contrast, but so this originated from a release that had a nice map in it. And I just asked for the data. They were like, here it is. Here's everything. And we turned it into a graphic. So if you have data, you know, it's a pretty, I guess, easy road. And takeaways. So know who you're making things for. Be conscious about, you know, how you're putting things in front of people. And just give people everything you have on your computer, all the data. All right. Thank you, guys. Guess there's questions now.
From the room? We'll take a question from online.
Should I just leave this looping?
Yes. Science writer from Seattle asks, how does the presenter decide how something is digestible for someone who does not share your headspace? Does he have a quick, or do you have a quick test, someone in office you could show it to?
Could you repeat that? I didn't get the first part of that question.
So she asked, how do you decide how something is digestible for someone who does not share your headspace? This is what I...
Yeah, so I mean, I think for graphics in particular, you know, if you make something sort of insane that doesn't exist before, like anything that's not like a bar chart or a line chart or some sort of pie chart, the most important thing is labeling everything, right? You're encoding data into some sort of mark. You should just educate people as to what you're doing. You know, the truth is that, you know, graphics literacy is something that is improving throughout time. I mean, we didn't have bar charts 100 years ago. So somebody had to make them, and we eventually all got it as a society. But I guess just annotating and educating people as to what you're doing, and giving them the tools to understand what you made is probably my best advice for that. And really, even if you do that, even if you put enough road signs on it, a lot of people just are not going to get it. But my thought is if somebody gets to my article, they probably want to look at this, right? Like you're going to have a promo that's going to have this crazy thing on it, and if you got there, you probably want to spend some time with this. Otherwise, why are you clicking on some crazy data viz?
Question from the front, please.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to move Jeb. There you go.
I'm Allison.
Hello.
Pittsburgh, the little blue in western Pennsylvania.
Very familiar.
I was wondering, when we, Media Relations, PIO, send out a press release, study, how do you want to be informed there's graphic potential with it? Like, we're not going to send Excel spreadsheets. Should we create our own graphic?
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way.
How good does it need to be? Because
I mean, it needs to, just make it. Try your best, right? I mean, the easiest way to show people that the data is something is to make something with it. If you've got something that's geographic, at least map it and say, here, is every X that we found in the United States. So that's what I would say. I mean, if it has graphic potential, make a graphic, even if it's bad, and just show people that, like, hey, this is mappable. This data is usable.
okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to that too, are you in the graphics folks, the folks in the graphics department, receiving those, or is it more the journalists receiving, the releases, the news? Like, how do we get to the graphics departments, the graphics people?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, are you always working with a journalist who's more?
No, I mean, I'll actually, a lot of the time now we're doing our own original stuff. So we're at the Post, we're trying to find like a unique visual angle for the news. Like how can we tell stories, visually with data, with maps that in ways that nobody else can. So we're originating our own reporting. But I guess your question, how to reach graphics desk, send them email, like find out who they are, find out, scope them out, find out who everybody in every graphics desk is, and find their emails and just send them stuff.
Spam you all I want.
Yeah, I'll just give you my email. It's, maybe I should just. It's my name with a period in between at washpost.com. So just sign me up for everything you have. All right.
Sweet.
I think we have a question in the front.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julia.
Hello.
So I'm at the American Institute of Physics. So
Cool.
most of the stuff, the data that we're going to be possibly accessing is going to be not so much of the social lean. It's going to be more hard data that's going to imply or indicate something very specific.
Yeah.
So is there interest from the graphics side to work? I think that would probably necessarily require more work with the scientists themselves.
I think, yeah.
But is there interest, and if so, what is maybe a better way of going about that, or inquiring from the researcher how to share that information?
So can you give me an example? Like what is this? Like what's a study, for example?
So for maybe a very general example, looking at how the resistance changes as you change the properties of a material when you're sending current through it, off the top of my head. So these are kind of very hard, very specific and precise measurements.
Yeah.
And then have large or implications based on what the actual data is. So now that data is sometimes proprietary, but very often it's just a bunch of numbers that have been run through. So it's the same sort of stuff. It's files that can be sent.
Yeah.
But perhaps I think a lot of academia is maybe stuck in the world of LaTeX as far as sharing their information, and that's not going to be as visually appealing to the public. Yeah.
So I think in that context, we would need the data to recreate the chart. But your example, for example, I just said that twice, but it's fine. What's important here is the insight, right? So a chart would show you that insight. The resistance changes when you do this. And if it gets picked up, you would have to send the data to, so we could recreate the chart. I guess it's not like social data that, this thing in every county. Did that answer your question? I think.
Well, I guess, so there is, it seems like there is interest, but, but is there still interest if there's a longer time commitment in finding what that meaning is? Because I think the way that scientists communicate with each other is a very different method that will effectively communicate something to the public. So it needs to be just visually, colors need to be changed. And and numbers need to be highlighted or put a meaning or, you know, understand what an MEV is, for instance. So it might require a little more time, but if there's interest, how, maybe if you can suggest some way to start that conversation?
Well, I think, I don't have a great answer for you, to be honest. Maybe we can talk later, but I think for very complicated data sets, and I think you touched on this, right? If something's like just way over somebody's head, it's probably unlikely that even through a lot of massaging, somebody, you know, will you know, bake it into something that the general public can understand well. But I mean, if there's interest, at least, you know, we'll make the effort, right? But we should talk more after this, because that's a hard problem. Yeah.
I have another question here, or comment that these examples look a lot like clickbait.
Thanks.
Rather than strong narrative or science journalism. So the commenter here is really worried that when you boil down data without sufficient context, you have a high chance to misinform.
Well, I shared screenshots, not the whole article, so maybe I'll provide links to the articles. Because you know, we do our own reporting, so it's not like we just make pretty things and, you know, share JPEGs. We write through them, explain why we did things, and show you, you know.
And in your defense,
Yeah.
that the mountain map
Yeah.
is very complex, and you guys spent a lot of time explaining
Yep.
what that meant and how
Yep.
you did it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I'll send them links.
And final question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Ryan. I work at the Natural History Museum.
Hello.
And one of the things I'm curious about is a lot of times in releases, we tend to kind of strip off any kind of attachments, photos, things like that for fear of getting caught in spam folders and whatnot. So I'll often include a line that just specifies that there's a Dropbox full of photos or whatever. And writers usually know that that's something that they want to include in their story.
Yeah.
Do writers, if I included a line like that about data, would writers in Washington Post or any other news outlet know to let the graphics team know that that photo exists? Or sorry, that those data sets exist.
I think, yeah, definitely.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Especially if it's a story or a study that requires a chart that makes sense, then, you know, it's anything you can provide up front is the best. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Jess from BuzzFeed News. Everyone knows what NPR is. Everyone is very familiar with the Washington Post, but I feel like I'm also here to evangelize a little bit about what BuzzFeed News is, what we do, and what we actually don't do. Contrary to popular belief, we're not a clickbait newsroom. We have been accused of that in the past, but our organization is made up of over 250 reporters and editors around the world. We bring in over 200 million views, clicks, pieces of engagement a month. And we have reporters and editors who come from established traditional news backgrounds. We have an investigative team that just finished up a 2-year investigation about ISDS and different trade deals around the world. We made a video about that as well. So we're doing wonderful work, and I think that a lot of times people don't know that because of our history. So we started in 2012 as a news organization. Before that, BuzzFeed, as you all know, was very popular for quizzes, lists, things that you do when you don't want your boss to know that you're super bored at work, that sort of stuff. And so a lot of our work is, you know, obviously doing journalism, writing interesting, engaging work, but also kind of debunking the myth that BuzzFeed isn't here to inform in an accurate way. So I kind of just want to know, does anyone know that BuzzFeed has a science team? Okay, oh, wow, my God, it's amazing. So yeah, we do really great work. And I brought a couple of screenshots of headlines that we've done recently. I just want to scroll through them just to show you the variety that we do and how we don't take ourselves too seriously at all. Well, here's a serious one. We do a lot of work about the culture, the inner workings of the science community. So we like to write longer form pieces about that. And then here's the most hygienic way to use the toilet according to science, which is kind of a funny headline. According to science, who says that? We do. Here's how your Thanksgiving is genetically altered. And this was a huge story for us. Does anyone know Azine? Yeah. So she did a lot of work about sexual harassment in the science community. And if you have any tips about that, definitely tweet her or tweet at her or email her. And then this is like a classic BuzzFeed frame, which is X number of things that you should know about this thing, or we need to talk about arthritis. So this is done by a science writer, and it's a way to access an audience that's super young, that doesn't want to read a lot, but loves to look at photos. And by the end of this list, the 16-year-old knows what might be in store for them when they're like 75. So yeah. And this is another classic BuzzFeed headline. Does anyone know what AF means? Yes. Okay, great. So 17 times Tumblr got real as blank about sleep disorders. And this is like, does anyone know like where or how we might start a story like this? Anyone? Social media. We have a Tumblr reporter who lives and breathes Tumblr and gets most of her content from Tumblr. If anyone's familiar with The Dress, does anyone remember The Dress from last year? That's where they got it from. They got it from Tumblr. So basically, she goes and she mines Tumblr for interesting information and then compiles it for her audience. It's a really, really easy way to connect with like youth online who only live on Tumblr and don't go to websites. They just go to Tumblr on their phone. And we compile it and share it for our audience. And this was a really great story we did recently. Arctic sea ice is freakishly low right now. And another more serious topic as well. So as you can see, we don't just do lists, we do real journalism, real reporting based on scientific research. So I wanted to talk a little bit too about what I'm doing at BuzzFeed. I'm on the BuzzFeed News staff, but I am the senior producer for our new news video team. And we're basically taking advantage of all of the growth opportunities on social media when it comes to video. This microphone is so low. So right now, video is a huge way to hack Facebook growth and Twitter growth and Instagram growth. If you can post a video that can get shared 30,000 times, which we do on a regular basis, you can bring more people to the page and you can get them to like your page. And then when you put out, more information, they can get that to show up on their news feed. So right now we're determined to grow our page on Facebook via news video content. And so let's say you pitch one of our health or science reporters, they might tell us there's a really great visual component to this story and we'll make a news video out of it. And it'll be around 30 seconds to a minute 30 long. So it's really, really difficult in that case to communicate scientific research that has context. So right now what I'm trying to do is find a way to take all of the things you might bring to us and put it into a 30-second video, a minute 30-second video, and make sure that it's accurate and responsible. So if you'd like to talk to me about that later, we can talk about how to do that. Definitely could use your advice. Does anyone have any questions about BuzzFeed News or what we're doing at BuzzFeed? Or how to talk to us in a way that we can present information like this using the word AF. There's a way to crack in, I'm determined.
Hey Jess, my name's Peter Botham. I'm with the University of Delaware.
Hello.
So one question I had is, I love the way you guys present. I mean, it's fun. It's the kind of thing that will engage readers. Mm-hmm. One thing that we come up against is, some researchers we might pitch will, they're more serious about their work. They might see something like this and be scared away. So what can we tell them about, how can we kind of sell them on what you guys do, and that, even though the headline might be, not really, something that they might be a little uncomfortable with, that there's something substantive beneath that?
Right. Several ways. I think the first one is understanding how we work. We're a regular newsroom. I sit in a regular newsroom with regular editors. I've had stories killed before because they're not accurate enough or they don't provide enough context. So I think like providing that level of security to your researchers, they should know that we operate just like the New York Times does, which is one of my previous employers. We have people who used to work at the New York Times. Everyone in the newsroom understands what a news story has to have in order to be published. We go through the same rigorous sort of fact-checking and copy edits that everyone else does. Our editor-in-chief comes from Politico and is in direct contact with almost every one of his editors and reporters on a daily basis. So we're all in the newsroom and it's all very kind of leveled out. So everyone knows what the other person is working on. There's never going to be a situation where a reporter and an editor are sequestered off in one part of the newsroom writing a story and it gets published and like, whoa, we shouldn't have done that. So they should know that we operate just like everyone else. We just have found a way to tap into that age group that no one else has found a way to tap into. And I think, while other news outlets are producing information of record, incremental studies on scientific research, that sort of stuff, we're doing things that help inform in the same way, but we're also able to get the 14-year-old to care about it and then to share it with their friends, and then it goes viral. And I think like at the risk of a sort of a clickbaity headline, like I'd rather get the 14-year-old to click on it using a headline that is a little bit strange to maybe a 45-year-old researcher, because then I get to inform that 14-year-old. You know what I mean? And I think that that's really difficult today. Obviously, everyone on the stage understands what it feels like to not be able to reach that like 18-year-old, right? Cool. Anyone else?
We have a couple of questions from online about the format you would accept, especially with videos. How do they get that to you? Do you want it already packaged? Do you want raw footage? What works best for you guys?
One thing that I love about working at BuzzFeed is that we can experiment with anything. We're open to anything. The other day, this doesn't have to do with science, but as we know, Donald Trump was having his first stop on his victory/thank you tour. Which one is it officially? It's the thank you tour, right? It's not victory tour. Thank you tour. And we had a reporter there. She was going to go live. She didn't have a good connection. We used Facebook Live to communicate to our audience. And we had a static feed from C-SPAN. And we were like hacking together a picture-in-picture from the reporter who was in the audience next to people wearing Make America Great Again hats. And then we had the static C-SPAN feed as our main frame. So like that happened in 15 minutes. And everywhere else that I've worked, like that would have to be maybe weeks in advance. So to answer that question, like just send whatever you have and we'll deal with it. It can be raw video, it can be photos, it can be like, hey, we have this thing, but we're not sure if you want it. Just email me informally and we can get it going. So I think like one thing to know about BuzzFeed is that we're open to experiment and we're open to be really informal and to have communication that you might have with your friend. It doesn't have to be like a formal press release whatsoever. And actually, like I would totally encourage opening up a line of communication that's just very direct and informal. Hi.
Question from the front.
Hi, my name's Melanie. I'm from the University of California, San Diego.
Hey.
And please tell your Tumblr reporter that we have a Tumblr, so mine it, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But since we are at EurekAlert, how often do you go to EurekAlert where we've put the press release and we've put photos and a video and a tweet?
Totally. So our science desk often, I think, Brian, isn't that right? They have access. When I used to work at Now This, which I'm sure you guys have seen maybe on Facebook, it's a video-only, mobile-only, digital-only platform. We started with that. I recently left and I brought my membership to BuzzFeed. So my news video department started in July of this year. So one of my goals by next summer, is to get more science content in video form. So I think like we haven't been using it that much because we're very new, but my plan as a producer on this team is to get people mining EurekAlert more often, for sure.
Now, Jess, that you mentioned that there are a lot of sort of bona fide reporters working at BuzzFeed.
Right.
I wonder what attracts a reporter like yourself, who used to work at NPR and New York Times, to a medium like Now This and Snapchat and BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I get this. I was actually just at the New School talking to an incoming class of young people who want to be journalists. So it's still happening. People still want to be journalists in the world. And they asked me the same question. I think young budding journalists all have the idea that they'll work at the New York Times right after they graduate. So it's still there. Like the love of traditional media is still there. I think that I had my time at NPR. I had my time at local member stations around the country. Actually, Nancy was my manager when I was an intern on the science desk at NPR. So I've been there, and I know what makes those places amazing. I respect them 100%, obviously. But I think the thing that brought me to Now This and BuzzFeed is because I wanted to be able to talk in the way I'm talking to you right now, informal, conversational. I wanted to be able to talk to the people that I've been reporting for however long, and I wanted to be able to talk to them without having to feel like I had to be a reporter. Like I wanted to talk to them like a regular person. I want to report information and inform audiences like I'm talking to my best friend. Like so we have this, this is a good tip for you guys. Like if you have a piece of research you want to share with BuzzFeed, ask yourself, would you text your friend right now that piece of research? And like, could you text it to them? Like, oh my God, guys, we just did this thing, and like the University of so-and-so just found out this huge thing about like alcoholism and like rats, and like, can you believe it? And like a GIF or a GIF. What do you guys say? GIF or GIF? GIF. I say GIF. So if you could do that, like we want to hear it that way. And I think that's why I went to BuzzFeed and Now This, because I wanted to be myself, and I wanted to be able to practice my trade. And I think that's like the best way right now to access the young audience, me, and the even younger than I am. It's also so fun to come into work every day. Our editor-in-chief has a phrase, it beats working for a living, so that's definitely a mantra at BuzzFeed.
I think we have an online question.
So when we pitch to BuzzFeed, do you want us to pitch it as a BuzzFeed story, for example, with your language approach, or would you prefer a more conventional pitch that you can communicate in your unique way? So would you prefer pitches or press releases?
Yeah, I was hoping that someone would ask this question. I'm kind of on the fence about it. Like I went to grad school, and one of my focuses there was how to report on science, basically, how to read a study and understand if it's a study that's a total sham or if it's a real thing that you want to report on and bring to your audience. So people like me can get a study and understand what it means and if it would be worthwhile bringing to our audience. But I think a lot of people at BuzzFeed actually are not traditional journalists and have been trained at BuzzFeed to be traditional journalists. So to answer that question, I think that you'd get more of a published success rate if you pitched us in a BuzzFeed way. Like, I wrote something down that was kind of like a BuzzFeed frame. Like a lot of times we're thinking more about how to frame the story than actually about the story. Like once the story's been told, our main focus is how do we actually get someone to click on this? And there's like a formula and there's a way to do it. So here's why that rat study about alcoholism won't solve your problems or addiction. Or we have a bucket called Delightful Things About the Universe, and one of the frames or headlines that we used for that was 26 pictures that will make you reevaluate your entire existence. And that got over 1 million views. But inside of that frame was like real reporting, real facts. It wasn't fluff. So it's not clickbait, it's like, hey, you actually should look at this. It's a way to communicate to people who don't want to be talked down to. It's a way to communicate to people who want to feel like it's authentic, right? So yeah, that's an example. So I think, like, to answer the question, if you're pitching the science desk, definitely pitch them in the same way you would pitch anyone else on this stage. But if you're pitching any other general reporter, like, try out a BuzzFeed frame. Like, I'd love to see that. And then we can talk about it and collaborate on how to make it even better. And to add on to that, one of our most successful frames across video platforms and posts on our website is the try method. So astronauts try eating during dinner time upside down, and let's live stream it. That would be something that our audience would stick around for an hour if we live streamed it on Facebook. people try wearing like girdles for a week. That was a story that we did. It's like a strange, and who wants to watch that? But 4 million people watched it. So if you have any like tryouts with your research, we'd love to look at that too. And I think it would be a really, really fun way to engage the science community and bring them to like 15-year-olds who don't get science and like probably are zoning out in science class.
Thank you, Jen.
Cool, thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jason, not Townsend. I'm Jason Townsend. It's right on the bottom of my slide here. And I am the Deputy Social Media Manager at NASA. A little different than most of the folks up here in that we are an institution ourselves and we have our own stories to tell. And so I'm just going to delve a little bit into how we do some of the framing and packaging of our own stories to get them out there through our own distribution outlets. And hopefully there's some really good takeaways here. So I want to talk about how we got our start in social media, though. It was 2008, and we had a business problem. And our business problem is that we had a limited time duration mission, the Mars Phoenix lander, and it was going to be landing on Mars and operating for, I believe, 60 or 90 days, a very short time period. Downlinks were going to be coming back from the red planet at all sorts of hours. It was not going to be neatly Tuesdays at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was going to be 4 in the morning on Sunday mornings, and it was going to be, midnight on Wednesdays and stuff like that. And so as a result of that, we had to figure out, how do we get the news out? How do we tell people about it in real time? Because all the data is going completely public on a public server where any, Tom, Dick, and Harry can go and download it and analyze it themselves if they have the know-how to understand what it all meant and figure out what the science was. And so we ended up standing up our very first Twitter account, the Mars Phoenix lander here. At the time, it grew to be the 5th most popular Twitter account with about 75,000 followers. But we told all the members of the press that this was the place to go to get news about it. And so as soon as we would get a data package downlinked, our scientists would go in, do a quick analysis of it, and we'd be able to tweet out the analysis relatively in short order, hopefully so that we're able to tell our own story out there. The really neat thing about this was that when we did discover water ice and everything, it came in at 8 in the evening on a weeknight, and we didn't have to go and put a press release out about it. We didn't have to tell reporters, by writing and drafting it, running it through a concurrent cycle, having somebody drive back to the office at 8 in the evening, making sure that they were going to log into our fax blasting system. We were not telework ready at the time, and draft up the press release in the right format and the template and fax blast it out to all sorts of institutions, and then start following up with emails. Please go check your fax machine. So yeah, this was an experiment, and it worked wonderfully, and this is how we got our launch on social media. Today, we've kind of grown and exceeded it. We now have 527 social media accounts spread across 14 different platforms. Our Twitter account is the 66th most followed Twitter account out there on Twitter and so on. And combined across all these accounts, we have about 125 million followers. Our social media universe is very large, very expansive, and continues to grow to this day. It's very heavily driven by visuals, which several people have talked about visuals. But at the end of it all, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're looking to move people from being kind of that armchair person who's casually following along as a fan, a follower, a consumer, into somebody that's kind of a brand ambassador for NASA, a creator that's taking our data and using it in lots of different ways, a collaborator who's helping us solve some of the big unknown unknowns that come along with doing things that have never been done before. So we're constantly looking to get materials out in ways that are just different. And so one of the ones that's really interesting is SoundCloud. We launched on SoundCloud here about 1.5 years ago, and we put up all sorts of iconic sounds, everything from historical sound bites from Neil Armstrong's, "One Small Step for a Man," quote, all the way up to the sounds of Jupiter going through the radiation belts. The radiation belts produce data that, if it was put in the audible range of the human ear, would actually make this weird choral kind of sound out there. So it's really interesting to see how those sorts of things happen and look at data in a very, very different way. And so we're using that SoundCloud as a distribution mechanism for that. We've also been putting podcasts here and having great success with building audience around a lot of that. And the big thing about SoundCloud was that it opened up a whole new audience for us. All of a sudden we had, Spin Magazine, Rolling Stone, we had DJ Magazine and so on, reaching out to us looking for, well, how are people using your space sounds and so on. They found DJs that were remixing them into songs, they found music producers that were using them, and all of a sudden those were people who were talking about NASA's missions to music audiences, which is not your traditional space audience out there. And so we were getting in front of non-traditional audiences. We're also exploring new storytelling, obviously, Snapchat and Instagram stories, looking at what we're doing, everything out there. Across those, right now, we're reaching 1.1 to 1.3 million each time we produce a story. It's incredible how people have really latched onto this, and they tweet us back, and they take snaps of our material and really tell us how much they absolutely love the story that we did, because they never really knew why planets were round, but yet they're round. And so, so we did a story that was just 10 facts about why planets are round and what produces that and so on, for example, here. I'll get into a little bit of case study on that in a minute, but we also want to really be in the moment. And so the neat thing about being in the moment here is finding the pop culture moments that are happening and latching onto them. So when the Martian movie was coming out, we really wanted to push our actual journey to Mars, how we're working towards getting humanity there in the 2030s. So we came up with a whole series of social media posts that we dubbed kind of the real Martian, and how we're making the Martian really a reality. Obviously, we don't want accidents to happen and people to be stranded on Mars, so we're talking about the safety systems and how we're going about building out those things. Some of the challenges that we've yet to overcome, chasing that impossible sort of dream out there, and really framing it around, the concepts that are there. We are right now growing for the first time our own vegetables in space on the International Space Station. So, we're hacking it just like Matt Damon did, growing potatoes on Mars. Trying to figure out how we can do that. How can we be sustainable out there? We also take advantage of opportunities where we can go back in our archives and pull material out and use them in real time. So when they did a reboot on Fox of Cosmos, Sunday night in primetime for an entire season, each episode was live tweeted by us. Each time something was brought up, we ended up putting out in real time as part of the conversation on the hashtag for the TV show and everything, the actual material with links to go follow up, learn more about it, and really kind of highlighting a lot of our archive material. So that was evergreen stuff that we never needed to go and create something new. It was just about resurfacing it and showing off where it was. We also play in pop culture, Sharknado 3. Why the heck is NASA talking about Sharknado 3? Well, that was the one where Sharknado went to space. David Hasselhoff commanded a space shuttle mission to get around a bunch of spacefaring sharks. Completely stupid, idiotic stuff here that absolutely brings the internet to life. It's one of the biggest engagement events every year on Twitter. And we were on there talking about our real research that we're doing, talking about how we're watching storms across the globe, how we actually track, migrations of animals in the oceans, whales and sharks and things like that, how we monitor, things like phytoplankton blooms and things that are completely related to topics that came up in the show, being a part of that conversation. And the result was that particular night, we ended up getting 17,000 new Twitter followers just because of the fact that we were talking about Sharknado in that conversation and being a part of it. One Direction approached us about filming a music video for one of their songs, Drag Me Down. That was all about nothing can drag me down, and so they literally were talking about leaving the planet on a mission, a fake mission to Mars in this case. So we actually let them come in and film, and we did a whole bunch of little vignettes about, they trained side by side with an astronaut in one of our labs and went through all of that in order to kind of showcase, not only what we do for training, but how, the band members were also physically fit and so on, which their teenage fans absolutely adored and went kind of gaga for. But the neat thing about it was all of a sudden, we were noticing the day that it all went live and we were talking about it, we had several tweets that went, 10,000 retweets, 20,000 retweets and so on, and we ended up gaining about 36,000 new followers. The vast majority of those new followers that we gained that particular day ended up being people who had avatars that were pink hearts and purple and oh my God, Liam and all this kind of stuff. And it was really, really fascinating. And we leveraged that because reaching out and getting young girls interested in STEM fields and getting them inspired to study STEM things in school and go on to STEM careers out there is our future pipeline as NASA, as an employer, but it's also our country's future pipeline for a lot of different industries. And so a lot of folks groaned and are like, why are you talking about One Direction? You've got to be kidding me. You're a space agency. Talk about space. And it's like, Well, actually, we're trying to inspire the next generation of explorers here. And so talking about that was a nice bridge for that. We want to be relevant, again, going back through our archives, everything from, Mother's Day, the Rose Nebula, trotted out every year, and it works like a champ every year. Tens of thousands of retweets and so on. Park Service, they were celebrating their 99th anniversary 2 years ago, 100th anniversary this past year. Bring out pictures of the parks from space, those sorts of things. So find those logical connections for content you already have on the books and trot it out when it's the appropriate time and the right news hook. We also go wall to wall with coverage when we have big news events going on. This is when we had our New Horizons spacecraft fly by Pluto. We had tweets going out nonstop. We had Facebook posts going out nonstop. We had Tumblrs that were going up. We had, all sorts of really incredible engagement across all of our platforms. But one of the unique things that we actually did is we built buzz. And this was to the chagrin of a lot of our scientists. But in the end, they were like, wow, that was one of the smartest moves we executed the day of Pluto flyby. And we ended up putting up the last image that we got back of Pluto before the spacecraft went dark for a 16-hour period because it was out of communications range in order to collect all the science data it was collecting at closest approach by the planet, by Pluto there. And so we took that photo an hour before our press conference where we were supposed to release that photo, and we put it out on Instagram on our own channel. And we chose Instagram because it's a visual platform, it's an awesome picture, it's not downloadable, and it was not in high resolution. And so we were not scooping ourselves, which was a big, big concern about science. We ended up using it as a sneak peek to promote the fact that at 8 a.m. we're going to talk about everything that we know about Pluto to date and how we're getting ready to get more science back that we hope is going to be even better than anything we've ever seen before. And as a result of us building the buzz around it by releasing that image there, which the media kind of groaned about and was like, why are you putting this on Instagram? You've got to be kidding me. And then they all took it and embedded it in their stories because it was the place to go and get it an hour before our press conference until they could go and download it off our website in high res and embed it and get the actual full science analysis with it. What ended up happening? That was our most watched press conference to date. It's a boring press conference. It was a bunch of people at a desk with a blue curtain behind them. It was a boring press conference up until all of a sudden they had this huge online audience. We started taking questions from our online audience in the chat room, and we started asking them during the press conference as well. And all of a sudden, the scientists, the PI and everything, all of their faces started lighting up, and they're like, that's a really interesting question. Let's talk about that, And they started diving into some of the topics around it and so on. And they started getting really in depth about what they knew and what they didn't know. And they talked about some of those unknowns that were out there that they hoped to get data back eventually to learn on. And so it was a really great success story for us of how we drove coverage because of a social media tactic that particular day. We also answer when you ask us a lot of questions and so on. We do everything from Reddit AMAs with our experts. We do Q&As on Facebook. We do tweet chats. Now we're doing Facebook Live Q&As and everything. So wall-to-wall questions, thousands of them come in. We try to get to as many of them as possible, put up a lot of our experts, show the diversity of our organization, show people who are more junior, not necessarily going with all of our principal folks who would necessarily be put out in front of a press conference, but some of our postdoc students that might be working on one of our missions or something. Bring them out and have them answer questions because, it doesn't take necessarily a PhD to talk about, all the aspects of a particular piece of research and so on out there. And it's garnered us a lot of good coverage. So want to just jump into a couple of quick case studies here. Snapchat, why do we use Snapchat? Audience, demographics. It brings a whole new audience to the table. Very young, about 75% of our audience is under the age of 24. And they tell us immediately how much they love following us because it's like, wow, I get to be nerdy in between all the stupid stuff that my friends are posting. And they really like that. And they really like getting that extra piece of information. It really allows us also to focus on one big account. In a lot of ways, with Twitter, we've got hundreds of different accounts. And so if you want to get the complete picture on it, you have to end up following multiple accounts. And that's part of our strategy that we're changing so that you can begin to get more of a complete picture across our account. Well, with Snapchat, we have one agency-wide account, allows us to tell a complete cohesive story, but also showcase a lot of different slivers of the big NASA pie that's out there. Managing content, we go through making sure that we have storyboards for all of our stories. What's the visual? What's the soundbite? What's the text on the screen? Are we using any emojis on it? How can we make it more relatable? Someone sent us a whole storyboard about an experiment called Sapphire that I'll show you a little bit here in a second. And they ended up making sure that the story was about as boring as it could possibly be. And we're like, look, we're lighting a fire in space on a spacecraft. We're not supposed to do that. fires are bad in space. You're in this oxygen-rich environment. Do we not remember why, we had the Apollo 1 accident? It was because of an oxygen-rich environment in an enclosed capsule, and it had a fire. And so that tragedy was prompted by that. So we're not supposed to be doing this, but we're doing it in a way that's very controlled, in a spacecraft that's left the space station, is going to burn up on re-entry anyway. And so let's go and experiment with that. Let's find that little inner pyro inside every kid out there that wants to burn things, and let's tap into that. That's the story that we should connect with, and that's the frame we should use. So we ended up redoing it. There's a couple of different types of stories to tell, and yeah, so this one's playing now if you watch over here. So this first-person stories, you'll hear in just a minute, hopefully, how we ended up having one of our scientists get on to talk about some new exoplanets they found. Now, exoplanets are planets that orbit other stars out there, which is kind of a weird word that a lot of the public doesn't understand. And so we tried to break it down about how many planets we found orbiting other stars, and we had our scientists come on and actually talk about it.
Double the number of objects that have gone from candidate status to verified status. There are now 3,200 exoplanets known to humanity, and Kepler is responsible for about 73% of them. It's the most prolific planet hunter ever built. This pie chart represents all the signals Kepler has identified to date. The blue slice represents the planets we already knew about. The orange slice represents the new planets we just announced. This gives astronomers a cool list of things.
And the video's lagging now. But the really neat thing about first-person storytelling is you can put a face to a story, and we've had a lot of success with bringing out different talent and bringing out different experts and really getting them in front of an audience that realizes that they too could go into this field, or they could study it, or that this is somebody that I could ask a question of. And so we make sure that when we get those questions, we come back to our experts to get answers, and we reply to that sort of stuff. So that way it's very engaging, and it is that two-way street. But we also like to take people behind the scenes. So this particular story over here was about a bunch of science samples, human blood draws and things like that, that were taken on the International Space Station by astronaut Scott Kelly as part of his year in space, as part of the twin study.
The one-year mission represents some of the most priceless cargo we've ever returned from space. The year in space is both our model for a mission to Mars, as well as a way to make healthcare better back here on Earth.
So we ended up taking, when the science team was going to go and collect them, once they had been returned to Earth, we ended up going with them with one of our social media team members to go into the lab and actually collect the samples out of the deep freezers and bring them back over to the area where they'd be analyzed and everything. The lab has all these controlled access procedures and stuff, and so we tried to show off the importance of going behind the scenes. This is a place that the public never ever is going to get to go on their own. How do we treat the samples? How do we do it? And how do we move it? And so we look for these behind-the-scene opportunities to really try to share the story as best as we possibly can and embed our followers so that they feel like they're there and they're part of that action. We also have our Fact Fridays, like I talked about, where we go through, fact things. So this was one we did for our Juno mission this year, where you could get less stupider and learn more about Jupiter. So, and we try to find those frames that really are engaging to folks. And so we try to keep them really short. And really keep it really tight, a minute or less. That way we find that our completion rates stay above 85%. So, and a completion rate on Snapchat is just your first snap, how many people saw it, and your last snap, how many people got all the way through your story. And that's one of our biggest metrics. Did we keep our audience there? Did they retain all the way through to the end? So, obviously cross-promoting it, letting people know Snapchat, it's hard to find. It's not very discoverable. So make sure that you put out on all of your platforms across the board that you're doing things there. That way people can go and find that you are on those platforms. Make sure your snap code's out there so it's easy for people to just save a screenshot of your snap code and then open it in Snapchat and add you immediately as a friend. So one other quick case study just to jump through here, radiation belt storm probes. This is a mission that is a mouthful. A lot of folks didn't understand it. The media did not reply that they wanted to come to the launch of it. They didn't really want to cover it as a story. Our science briefing had exactly 6 reporters in it. And so it was one of those things where we were wondering, okay, what can we do here to make it more interesting and garner more coverage? So we ended up inviting our social media followers in. This is not unusual. We've invited 7,000 of our social media followers to date in to visit us 125 plus times now. And so we bring groups of 50, 100 social media followers in behind the gates, give them access to our experts and our facilities that are not generally open to the public. And these are largely influential users online. We try to build an in-person event that's really compelling, that showcases a lot of that access, speakers, more, again, mid-level, junior, sort of people, and kind of, set the stage that bridges that virtual and in real life divide. But we also look to create these brand ambassadors through this program, where we are able to kind of convert that casual space enthusiast into a collaborator to share what NASA's doing, take it back to their local community, and really share it with their circle of influence. So we have this absolutely incredible mission that's going to be studying the Van Allen probes for the very first time. And it's one of the very first
discovery of the
space discoveries ever.
Half a century later, the Van Allen belts are still a mystery. But that is about to change. Join us as we make history operating 2 spacecraft in this fierce environment of the Earth's radiation belts. Flying through these 2 donut-shaped regions of high-energy particles, the twin spacecraft will gather data to help us learn more about the sun's influence in this extreme environment and understand how the variations affect work in space and life on the ground. With these spacecraft, we will provide the key to understanding the extremes of space weather. Buckle up for the ride that begins in 2012.
So, interesting thing about this is that those 50 folks that we invited down to the launch from our social media accounts and everything were on site to see it. They were tweeting live about it and so on. And so they were there starting 2 days before launch. We took them behind the scenes. They could see the satellite. They could see the rocket. We took them out to the launch pad. We took them behind all the facilities where we prepped all of it. We had them meet the science team members, talk to all of our PIs, talk to each instrument PI for each of the different science instruments on board and everything. And what ended up happening is that throughout those 2 days that they were on site, where they were tweeting and posting and sharing their hearts out about everything that they were seeing, and they were so geeked out about visiting NASA that they didn't care that it was kind of an uninteresting mission as far as a lot of the public was concerned. What ended up happening is that the volume of reporter calls were increasing throughout those 2 days. They're like, hey, I saw this thing online that somebody somewhere was sharing about something that they had seen or that they had heard, or a soundbite from a scientist. And so on. And what ended up happening was that it turned around, and it was almost about 90% of our baseline for a normal mission launch in the end as far as media coverage goes, even though we had exactly 6 reporters that were credentialed to cover the launch as of a week out before the actual thing happened. And the vast majority of reporters that ended up calling in and asking for credentials at the last minute, asking for questions and arranging interviews and things like that, they're all like, hey, I saw this thing online. And so it was a great way for us to build buzz about a mission with an audience using our social media followers to help us come in and be a part of the story themselves and help generate that extra level of buzz. So why are we doing this, though? Well, it's the law. We have a mandate. We have a mandate to provide for the widest practical and appropriate dissemination of information about our activities and the results thereof. But simply put, we care. We want to share as much about NASA as possible with as many people as possible. That is our mantra. That's what we want to do. At the end of the day, why would we not want to share this, though? I mean, it's absolutely incredible stuff, and why would we not want to alert the public to its existence out there? So, with that, that was a little longer than 15 minutes, but I do apologize. But hopefully that was some interesting things, and that's kind of what we're up to on social media at NASA.
We have a couple of questions online about the interaction between the social media team and the public affairs team or the media relations team. And question about, if you have this big of an audience and you have your own channels, do you still need mainstream media?
Do we still need mainstream media? The answer is yes. It takes all types in order to tell our story. Now, the thing that's been interesting is watching the media landscape change. There used to be dedicated space reporters. Well, now we may have dedicated science reporters that cover a lot of different science beats, and space happens to now be one of them. Some outlets don't even have dedicated science reporters anymore. So as the media landscapes changed and shifted, we've tried to take advantage of the tools that are now readily available out there to try to tell our own story and get it directly in front of the people. But different people collect information and get it from a lot of different sources. You know, they're going to hear about it from word of mouth from friends. They're going to hear about it from the news media. They're going to hear about it from one of our social media outlets. They're going to hear about it from a friend of a friend of a friend who they happen to follow on a website because somebody retweeted something that then got shared over on another site and so on. So there's a lot of different avenues, and so what we really just want to do is make sure that all of the avenues are fed with information, feeding the beast out there, and so it's all complementary to one another, and at the end of the day, again, our mandate is to disseminate the information as widely as we possibly can, and so therefore, yeah, we want to feed all the beasts.
Question from the front?
So I have two questions, and the first is kind of a lighter one for all of you. With video, I noticed in the videos you were showing, you're shooting vertical video. If I'm giving video to, obviously I'm not giving video to NASA, but if I'm giving video to you all, how do you want it? Horizontal. Okay. Why vertical? Or was that just the way?
I'll take it vertical.
You'll take it vertical? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Snapchat's vertical. That's why I was showing
That's
vertical
why you were
video.
showing the
And so on, Snapchat natively works in vertical. Yes, you can tell folks with an arrow to turn their phone and stuff, but who wants to do that? I mean, you know, you're watching it, that's how it's supposed to be, that's how it's supposed to be. So we produce our videos both in 16:9, and if it lends itself to a platform like Snapchat or something, we'll produce a vertical version of it. So
gotcha.
The verticals are one-offs, though, rather than standard practice.
So probably do horizontal for you all, those BuzzFeed will take vertical.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take anything. Yeah, we want it to look like everyone else's video. We don't want it to look like it's above someone who's watching. So like we have ways of making vertical video look really cool. Okay. And I can tell you more about that later.
Okay. Good. The other question, you have that Ask NASA. So I'm wondering, when I think about if I were to say like, so I'm with a health providing institution, and if we were to tell people, ask us anything, we could probably get some kind of nasty questions. I'm wondering if you all get that, or how you deal with
Oh yeah,
that.
Supermoon. Believe me, the number of people that give us a butt picture because it's a moon is hilarious until it's not. And so yeah, we deal with a large volume of stuff. You know, our inbound messages coming at NASA across all of our accounts and so on every day is about 80,000 inbound things between replies and comments and things like that. And so we do use software that filters for a long, long list of keywords that just puts them in a moderation queue for a human to take a look at, in addition to us just visually scanning comments and things and moderating them, you know, manually. So yeah, we have to stay on top of it. And the interesting thing about the space that we occupy as a government agency, technically our lawyers have told us that things like Facebook comments and so on are a public forum, and so people can go there to exercise their right to petition their government. So there's a large number of comments that while we could completely disagree with and the science facts don't support it, we still have to entertain that discussion as part of those particular things. So there's a whole crop that loves to come on every Earth Science post and say the Earth is flat. Well, you're entitled to your opinion, and you are more than welcome to exercise your First Amendment rights as an American citizen to tell the US government that you think the Earth is flat. So thank you very much. Thank you for following America's space program. So, you know, and so as a result of those sorts of things, though, we do have that community that we've built, those followers that we've invited in, and so on, who are able to come in and engage in the debates and show the data and so on in a way that we as an institution cannot. And so a great story I'll tell you is, you know, when the government shut down in 2013 for 17 days, NASA went dark. We were not able to work, we were not able to, you know, do anything, post anything, and so as a result, we were sent home. And our community stepped up in a big way those 17 days. Space didn't stop happening, you know. There were comet flybys, there were spacecraft arriving, or doing flybys of Earth at the time on their way to get a gravity assist, a slingshot around, to go out to other planets further out in our solar system. There was an astronaut who passed away during that time frame, and we were not in the office to be able to be a primary source of raw material because the government was on furlough. And so as a result of that, our community stepped up and crowdsourced data out there from a lot of the data banks that were continuing to have automated data put into them. They were analyzing the data packets that were coming down and finding out what the meaning was, to the point that they ended up tweeting out on the hashtag things NASA might tweet. They ended up doing it over 17,000 times during all of that. There were about 5,000 or 6,000 contributors to that entire effort. And the news media ended up turning around and using our community that we had built as a primary source for information, crowdsourcing things like the astronaut biography details and so on when the astronaut passed away, one of the Apollo astronauts did. They ended up getting a lot of that material because our community was going through and harvesting the factoids out there and so on in a way that we weren't able to do because we were off work. So, building that community, not everybody has rocket ships and space and so on, but, getting like-minded people together in a room and having them all talk about the same thing and engage in that really can help kind of lift all boats, so to speak, out there. So that way you can get benefit out of it, they can get benefit out of it, and together it's kind of a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship.
Can I ask a question? No, Jason, this is incredible, but this is scary. How many people do you have doing this?
So across the board at NASA, we have about 125 people that touch social media as some part of their official duties. Of that, though, only 14 are full-time. And so the rest of them usually are a member of a mission team directly embedded. So if you're following and tweeting the Hubble Space Telescope, that's a member of the Hubble Space Telescope team. It's very decentralized. And so they sit with the science team. They are able to turn to their colleagues and get direct answers to questions immediately. They sit in all the staff meetings. They know what's coming up. We got this cool new image. We're going to release it on Friday kind of thing. And so they know it's coming. They can go ahead and work the material, couch it in the right ways, and get it out the door when it's ready. So that way it's kind of an authentic representation of those particular different missions and stuff. That's 5 or 10% of their job. They're also responsible for making sure that the website gets updated, the brochures get made, the posters get created, the exhibits that we're showing at different events and stuff are created. They are responsible for building out PowerPoints for the PIs to go give presentations and stuff. And so they wear lots of hats. The 14 of us that are full-time on social media, we are kind of the folks who are in charge of the big flagship NASA accounts or our big centers, each like Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland or the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, those sorts of places. They've got full-time staff that oversee those institutional accounts and so on. But we also try to make sure that those people who are focused on institutional accounts are also helping build out strategy and working side by side with the folks who are part-time, so that way that we can leverage resources in the right ways to tell all the right stories. So we're all in it together, and we all want to tell the stories together. And so if we're not telling the right stories at the right time and we don't have the right assets in place, then we're not positioned to be able to accomplish our mission and our mandate out there.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Final speakers from Harvard University. When I was working as a PIO, I often asked myself, this must be easy for Harvard.
Sure. Okay. So I figured that I would start this off by showing you a chart that violates every aesthetic principle that you have heard here today. But nevertheless, I put this up here because I wanted to just throw out there a couple thoughts that have been preoccupying me for the last couple weeks. This is a chart from a study from PLOS One, where what they did is they surveyed a few hundred scientists, all of whom were members of AAAS, and asked them a very simple question. These were all scientists that were somehow actively involved in engaging the public about their work. And they asked them, simple question, why do you do this? Why do you spend your time engaging the public? And the number one answer that came back was, I do this to defend science. So the number two, the close second, was to inform. Simply, to tell people what is right, what is, the truth. And trailing all the way at the end is building trust and tailoring messages. Now, it's interesting, there's almost like in these results sort of a cruel irony baked into this, because if in fact they are defending science, it's probably because on some level science is under attack or perceived to be under attack. And if something is under attack, what you need to do is build trust. You need to tailor your message. Probably what you don't need to do is to go on the defense or to be pedantic about your point. So interesting, got me thinking. actually, the day that I saw the study, that a friend of mine sent it to me, I saw this article in the Harvard Business Review. It went viral. I'm sure a number of you probably saw it. Essentially, the writer here is pointing out that there's this increasing suspicion that a large percentage of the American public has in professionalism. People, your standard professional trades, lawyers, doctors, teachers, professors rate pretty low, actually. A lot of you probably saw this in 538. There's a lot of sort of hand-wringing after the election, but simply this article takes a lot of Pew research, a lot of Gallup poll research, and just shows how there is this very steady erosion of public trust in long-standing, storied institutions. Now, this should kind of shake some of us up, because a lot of us in this room are here because we represent some very venerable institutions. And this is kind of making the point that we can't just work under the assumption that because we represent X institution, people are going to trust what we have to say, believe what we have to say. And just to kick you when you're down, I'm sure that some of you have seen this website. It got a lot of press lately. It's a group that kind of targets what they perceive as liberal professors, and across all universities. I frankly don't even have any words for that. But the point, the issue that this raises for me is that when we're talking about the theme of today, which is a very important theme, communicating science in this age of clickbait, that is to a large extent a tactical issue and a tactical challenge, and it has tactical solutions, and we've been hearing about some pretty awesome tactics so far. But there's a larger challenge that especially we as PIOs are having to deal with, and that is communicating our research into what is essentially an atmosphere of mistrust. And that is not tactical. That is, not to be overly dramatic, that's kind of existential almost. I don't have the slightest idea what the answer is or what the solution is or how to solve this, only it just forces me to think that regardless of what we do, of what we say, of what platform we use, there's this need to make sure that we return to first principles. And that is to ensure that every message that we are putting out there is credible, every message has integrity, and that the public can depend on us. There's a phrase that my old boss, Rick Borchelt, when I worked at the Whitehead Institute, used to say, and he would say that it is our job to manage our institute's trust portfolio, and that is a phrase I always liked. So that's just, so I don't want to kick this off as just a Debbie Downer or something, but that is a way in which I'd like to frame this. So a lot of what you have been hearing today are the very approaches, very things that we are putting into practice where I work. I'm over at the Central News Office at Harvard University, and more regarding our digital content, which is, I guess at this point, just another way of saying content, we are embracing what is called the distributed content model. Someone told me yesterday that someone at BuzzFeed had actually coined that phrase. I don't know if that's distributed content model. But essentially, yeah, okay, take credit. Essentially, if you are serious about engaging the public and serious about a real public discussion, we have to just surrender once and for all the sacred cow of having our website be the center of gravity. And I'm sure that all of us in this room have had plenty of heated discussions with management about how do we drive more traffic to the website, how do we keep people at our website, and we have to let go of that. And instead of just driving traffic to the web, and this is what we've been hearing about, look at our content as individual components. We have text, we have videos that we create, we have images, we have audio. Take those components, extract them from our, from the website, and put them out, find the platforms that are appropriate to them. and let them live there. And some of these platforms are ones that we own. They are in the house that we live in, and a lot of these platforms are out there, and we just rent them. And we put them out there, and we relinquish some kind of control, but that expands our audience, expands our reach, and allows real legitimate public discussion. So I had an example, but I would just kind of go through this really quickly. There's a really cool study that came out about this soft robot that was created at the Paulson School of Engineering at Harvard. Really cool study. They created this robot based on an octopus. There's no electronics in this robot. It is powered by microfluidics. It's created on a 3D printer. My good colleague, Leah Burrows, wrote this beautiful story, made this beautiful video, produced a number of images as well. So we do all the standard things that we as PIOs do. We put it on the school website. We put it on the university, the central website. We put it out in our email newsletter that goes out to countless people. When this article goes to Facebook, and this is important, rather than just link to Facebook or share or whatever, we take the video and we load it into, we upload it. So now it is Facebook's. It is native content to Facebook. Facebook loves when we do that. And automatically it prioritizes it in people's feeds, it boosts it, it gives it a lot more visibility. Right there, this one, when I took the screenshot, had 190,000 views. What's really interesting about that is that our Facebook audience is over 85% not based in the US. And it is, the lion's share is between the age of 18 and 35. So right away, it's a very global, very young audience that is being reached by that. Obviously, it lives on YouTube. This video kind of went crazy. That had close to 300,000 views. When we tweeted it, and this is just kind of a best practices with Twitter. Leah, when she tweeted this out, we had this is a screenshot, so you can't see. Right now, the Octobot is wiggling and trying to get away. So she tweets it out once, puts a very cute, adorable headline over that, tweets it out again a few hours later, and this time tweets out this, I think this sort of beautiful, almost kind of fine arts image. And then a few hours later, tweets it out again, this time, and it's another GIF, and you would see this wiggling Octobot right there, and sends it out this time with this very clear sort of explanatory headline. And this is just one example. Obviously, you just saw some great examples of this approach within this panel discussion. And we've also done a number of other projects, not necessarily science related, but where we've created these videos, short videos, 30 to 60 seconds long. And there's a very particular way that we do them, but they only live on Twitter, they only live on Facebook, they only live on Instagram. They are actually not the kind of video that we would necessarily put on our main website. They're just unique to those platforms, and they actually do very well. I'm happy to talk more about them if you're interested, but did want to say, since the subject of today is clickbait, this article did get lots of coverage, and one website that covered it, The Verge, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, and this is their clickbait headline. And that's true, because this thing is actually powered by this buildup of gas that expands inside of it, causes it to move, and when there's a buildup of gas, the gas needs to be expelled. And even a science writer as sophisticated as Rachel Becker, can't resist the crowd-pleasing gratification of a fart joke. And there's actually, and I counted, there's 8 of them in this article. So, there you have it. I want to talk a little bit about Facebook Live. That's something that we've alluded to during this presentation. But this is something that we have taken kind of a deep dive into. Now, I'm sure all of you know what Facebook Live is. You just stream live videos on Facebook. We've started doing it a lot since the summer, experimenting with different things. And the one thing that we have decided that we are not going to do with it is a lot of the things that you typically do with streaming. Okay? And if you think, like, when in your university or your research institute, when do you do live streaming, or what do you live stream? It's events. It's this. This is being live streamed right now. You have some VIP show up to give, a speech. Oprah comes to your campus. You live stream Oprah. We decided not to do that because there's this lack of polish to the Facebook Live platform. More often than not, it's being done with an iPhone, and so it kind of fell flat when we tried to do some of these more kind of traditional streaming things. So what we have decided to do instead, because the Facebook Live streaming is a rather intimate sort of format, and so we thought, let's use it to give, sort of like as a show and tell, so to speak, or to give people access to those parts of our university that they normally just don't have access to. So we've started to use it to bring people into parts of some of our museums, some of the libraries, to give them access to different parts of student undergraduate culture and life, and we've started to use it for science as well. And the way that we are using it for science is very intentional and very specific. Find someone who's got something really cool to show, and have them show it to us. So the way it's been working so far, they've been about maybe 20, 25 minutes long. We go to a person's lab, and we take a tour. And it's, we've been thinking about this and maybe, just talking about it ahead of time, so we sort of know the trajectory that we're going to take. But they take us through the lab and show us something cool. And the format, we have the scientist, for example, who will be the talent, so to speak. Then you have to have a stupid question asker, and I take that role. I'm somewhat even overqualified for that job, but I'll be the, what's that? And, they're walking through. We obviously have someone filming it, and the only piece of equipment that we have invested in here to do this is a Steadicam. So you don't have to, so people don't have to take a Dramamine when they're watching this on their computer. And most important, that we have someone who is following us around, standing behind the camera, holding a laptop computer, plugged into this, watching it live, and capturing questions. It's because what we're doing while I'm pointing and asking, what's that, I'll intermittently turn to the camera and just say, hey, this is Facebook Live. Do you have questions? Type them in. We'll do we'll try to get to them. We try to make it as interactive as possible. So far, our early experiments in doing this have actually been really successful. I'm going to show you a brief, are you going to be able to help me? So, okay. The embedded video in the PowerPoint thing was lagging and getting a little weird. This video, which I'm going to show, thanks, is a tour of a lab where they're creating robotic bees. We call them the robo-bees. I don't know if anyone saw that Black Mirror episode. It's not those robo-bees. That is not what we are making. But it's a lab making these robotic bees, and we didn't do any promotion for this one. We literally just went in there and started filming. The numbers that we had of consecutive viewers was astounding. At any one point, there were at least 4,000 consecutive viewers watching it. And I think just over the 20 minutes when we were done, there were probably close to 20,000 people had seen it just in that time. I'm just going to play you about 20 seconds so you can just get a sense. So this is the graduate student who's been leading this project, and she's about to open up this vacuum chamber where they do these experiments on the wings of these robo-bees. And so just a couple seconds.
A vacuum chamber setup where we can run wing driver experiments. So you can see there's a half of a bee mounted right there. That's the wing, this is the actuator. So we can generate the same flapping signal, and then we have high-speed camera that just zooms right in on the flight, right on the wing pattern, wing stroke pattern. started this video. Okay, so what we did in this instance is we closed off the chamber, we pumped some of these like oil droplets into the chamber, and then we used a laser sheet to look at the stroke angle.
So this was filmed in the chamber that you just showed us?
Exactly. So
Okay.
there are normally two.
Okay. The reason I want to show that to you is because I want you to see how spectacular it is not. It's kind of a, first of all, you know, hands get in the way of the camera, and you can't edit that out. You know, and if I ask a question that's even unusually stupid, even for my standards, you know, you can't edit that out. It stays there. It's in. You know, we're walking through the lab. You know, things shake around and so forth. But what is kind of cool and engaging about that is it is a very authentic format. It's when you're doing this live and you're doing this for 20 minutes and you're asking questions and you're letting the researcher talk and you're having questions from online just being, you know, thrown at you. You know, after a few minutes, it's very hard to be inauthentic in this format. And I think that is maybe, for some reason, kind of speaks to why these videos have actually been really popular. I think right now this one has close to 200,000 views on Facebook. We would never put this video on our website. We would never put this video on YouTube. It just would suddenly not kind of feel right on that kind of platform. But on Facebook, living here, it suits it. It feels right. And to even just very quickly loop back to what I said at the very beginning about this era of mistrust and suspicion that a lot of science is falling under, I think what we really need to do as much as possible is communicate authenticity in whatever way we can. Just letting, you know, people don't trust scientists when scientists give them the correct data. You know, that isn't what creates trust. What creates trust is some sense of being able to relate and being able to intuitively connect with someone on a human level, even having just some inkling of a sense that that person might have, you know, some of the same values that you have. That's what creates trust, and that's what I think sort of cuts through, could hopefully, I hope I'm maybe a little idealistic, but could offer somewhat of a solution to this. So anyhow, I'm happy to talk or answer other questions about, we've been targeting these videos as well and doing some of that other more tactical stuff, but I'll stop there.
Questions from the audience?
Yeah, I did have some questions about the specifics of, like, what time did you do this, or do you do these? How do you target them on Facebook?
Yeah, no, thanks.
When they're in Facebook, they live in the video. I mean, I've found it very hard to find old things on Facebook, so do you have some sense about how people are finding these 3 months after they actually happened, when they were buried behind all the new stuff?
So, in terms of where it lives, if you just go to our Facebook page, there's a video tab. You click videos, and it's all very clearly laid out. There's sections that just says Facebook Live videos, and it lives there. So at the moment, and who knows if this is going to continue to be the case, but as for right now, Facebook is prioritizing these. They love it when you do this. If you were to right now just start live streaming this, every one of your Facebook friends who is either online or on their phone would suddenly get pinged that you are streaming live at the moment. Again, we don't know if they're going to keep doing this indefinitely, but for now, they are prioritizing this. And so people who like us, people who are, you know, our fans, this is getting boosted in their feed. So that's one way it's happening. So you can't, my understanding is while you're doing the video, or before you do the video, you can't do the organic targeting, or, you know, some of the things that, like, you can go into Facebook and take a post, take a video, and target it to your audience. You could use all these criteria, all these terms, once it's posted and once it's living there. And we've done that as well as you can do paid social boosting as well. and you could pay them as much or as little as you want. But that, that is also a way to get your content, to have it be more visible in Facebook. In terms of the time of the day, that's a really interesting question, because this one we did at like 10 in the morning or something like that. And then we realized, well, so much for, the West Coast, But then again, so many of the people who were jumping in on this and sending us hearts and, blowing kisses or, whatever, all these things that you can do, they were all over the world. And so, we have a huge percentage of followers in Egypt. It's sort of odd when you look at all the demographics. And so we did, the one that we did after this, we did later in the day, about, I think it was like 1 or 2 o'clock, but keeping in mind California. And that one, we actually sent out an alert to our list of science reporters. And after that was done, after it was on Facebook, we then did a special targeting to people who had certain, science and science-related terms, listed as their interest, and who had any sort of journalism or, journalism degree or as a degree or profession listed in there. So we did a special boost out to those folks as well, and got some interesting results from that.
Can I chime in here on that for 2 seconds? I just want to say on Facebook Live as well, it matters what page you're going live from. And the best analogy that I've ever heard it in a way that made sense to me about going live, because the notification is the key thing that's going to get people to tune into it, is that you want to go live on the mid-range page. And what I mean by that is you have an anchor that's on a TV show that has their own page. You have the morning news show that has its own page. And then you have that channel that has its own page, the NBC affiliate in Pittsburgh or whatever, has its own page. You want to go live on the mid-range page out of those 3 options, because you have small anchor audience, you have medium-size, TV show audience, and then you have the large channel-wide audience. But then once you go live on that mid-range page, you want both people on either side to share that post out there to propagate it to their followers who are also connected and live there. And so that way the push notification doesn't annoy the users on the big channel page that has the biggest audience possible, but yet all the audience that is tuned in and online on the platform at that moment in time have access to the feed and the fact that you're live now. But also the same thing with the anchor, it's too small of an audience to push that push notification out necessarily, and make sure that they see it in their feed. You're missing out on the bigger audiences that are out there as well. So look for that sweet spot in the middle, and that's really where we've had a lot of success, and that's something that we've benchmarked against other organizations as well for how to do it, because right now there's just a lot of different Facebook pages and you're always wondering which ones to go live with. So that's the analogy I've heard, and that's the case study that we've seen that has worked the best in our practice as well. So,
yeah, there's a lot of Facebook pages associated with the university, some official and some not so much. But this was done through the main central Harvard University page.
We have a question in the back, and then I think we'll take a break and then come back and take more questions.
Hi, my name is Viviana, and I want to talk a little bit about your remark on trust of institutions, and I completely agree with that. I think that sometimes people don't trust science, but I wonder if you encounter trust on the other side. I feel like sometimes researchers also don't want to engage in science communication, and so this becomes a barrier, and I wonder if you encounter that, and what are the suggestions that you have, or what you try to do to, prevent that from happening, or convincing them that it's important?
I mean, yeah. And, it's interesting because I've noticed that sometimes, and this is anecdotal, this is not, I don't have a chart to back this up, but oftentimes the younger a scientist is in their career, the more preoccupied they are with tenure, and and they have and that is kind of getting that R01 grant and so forth. And oftentimes I found that it's the older scientists that are a little bit more senior that might tend to be just more naturally inclined and have some more of a civic sense to that. Now, even as I'm saying this to you, exceptions are just popping up in my head. But I mean, there are many scientists that I've encountered that really just that are doing really cool stuff, and it just is not computing with them the need and anything that is outside of doing their actual research or just talking to their colleagues, just talking to people in their field. You just can't get through. So I don't know, and I've thought about that a lot too, and looked at different disciplines that they're in and sort of tried to make connections. If you're doing this kind of research, are you more, inclined to that? I mean, a lot of times people who are scientists who are just really deep in the weeds in basic research, it's not that they're necessarily resistant to talking to the public, but it's because their work is so arcane, it almost doesn't even just occur to them that this is something to do, whereas faculty members who might be doing, basic research but work at a hospital too and have some applied clinical aspect to their work, are very, very savvy and very connected to this. But yeah, I mean, it is, I think, an ongoing problem for any of us who work at institutions or universities, and we're always complaining to each other about that. So.
Great. Thank you, David. So we'll take, why don't we take a little bit of a break and come back at 3:20, and I think we have a couple of PIOs on site who have pitches that they want to throw at our panelists, and then we'll continue with some Q&As. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to start this next portion of our seminar with a question that I think a lot of you want to know, and I'm going to put all of our panelists on the spot. And the question is, what is the number one thing you look for in a pitch? What turns your head? What makes you click from, the hundreds of emails that you receive from PIOs? It makes you want to look at it. Nancy, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I mean, because we're a news organization, we're always looking for science news, but we have so little bandwidth compared to what's coming out. We're super, super picky. So you have to kind of think about this, is this like a really significant study in this topic? Is it big? Does it affect tons of people? Or on the other hand, is this just so crazy, quirky, wonderful, we won't be able to resist it? And so we have to pass on a lot of really wonderful stuff just because of that. But as I mentioned earlier, we're also definitely looking for more long-form issues where we can really get into them more in depth. And so it might not necessarily be something we would cover on the day that the study gets published, but we would take it and say, ooh, that's really interesting. Let's think about that for something for the future. And especially if you think about it, if there's some multimedia or social possibilities for the researcher or the topic, it would be great to have some time to explore that and think about what we might do about it. Especially maybe it's something that if the person's going to be working on for months or years, and we could check in at different points along the way and do something with that. So both short-term breaking news, important and also quirky. Number 3 would be something that we would maybe cover on an ongoing basis.
So for us, since our job is to cover the news visually, we have to look at everything through that lens. So is there something you can show me that is surprising and that would surprise our readers? Like the whole show don't tell approach. And also I think just as a matter of what does the study mean for people? Like I think in whatever language you provide, that should be pretty high. Like what are the consequences of these findings? So that's sort of my bar.
I think the first thing that I think is, would I share this and would our audience share it? That's something that we really, that's the metric that we care about right now. It used to be views. It used to be clicks, it still kind of is clicks, but right now for us on social platforms, it's about sharing. And you can, like I used to work for a company that produced for Snapchat, and even Snapchat looks at shares as a point of engagement that matters. Like it's not a public share in the same way that Facebook or Twitter is, but they can tell when a user has sent a Discover story to one of their friends on Snapchat. So sharing, and then at BuzzFeed News, we do actually care about news impact and the impact that a story might have on the world. So will this satisfy like our pillars of impact and like the needs of impact for our news organization? And then because I am a news video producer, it has to be visual, and it can't be like a boring visual that maybe Reuters would put out on their subscription wire. It has to be something that if you're scrolling through your news feed on Facebook can catch your attention in 4 seconds. Like there has to be like at least a 3-second part in this video that would catch my attention and make me go scroll back up to look at what's gonna happen next.
A little bit different than those folks. We get more flags of content that programs are getting ready to come out with or missions are going to be releasing and so on. And so in the things that we look for out of those flags, we look for what materials do we have that support the story. So do we have a great visual? Do we have a video? Do we have a package? Do we have, you know, a well-written web feature to put up on our website? You know, those sorts of elements. And then take that language, take that visual, and massage it into a social media ready product. And so sometimes that's repackaging it, or you know, realizing that the actual news is in the 5th paragraph and not the lead at the top. You know, those sorts of things. And that's the element that we were going to go take and write a tweet out of, and so on. So you know, that's the things that we definitely are looking for when it comes to taking the content and getting it out to our widest audience.
Yeah, so obviously for someone like myself, it's a very different thing when the person pitching to you gets paid by the same, you know, upper management structure that pays me. But I mean, sort of speaking on behalf of the Harvard Gazette, which is the central news organ of the university, I mean, even though its mission is to be publicizing, you know, the work and the research and the life and the culture of the university, you know, certainly the editorial standards there are, I mean, there's a lot of people working on that are from newsrooms and so forth. So it does, the criteria kind of falls into the same, there's a lot of times we have to tell people no, that we're not just an in-house news release distribution vehicle for, you know, whatever, you know, pet projects different people have going on in their individual units, and that this is, while this is not, you know, a standard traditional journalistic outlet, it still operates under journalistic standards. Is this a good story? Is this in fact news? Do you have, you know, all these components that we're talking about? You know, visuals, is there something surprising here? I know from the science end of things, we are constantly being asked to work with or write about, you know, studies that are really just incremental improvements in a long series of studies that is going to continue to have small incremental you know, steps forward. And a lot of times, you know, we have to be the bearers of bad news to researchers, saying that, you know, for your colleagues, this is awesome, and this will really go over well at a poster session for the Society of Neuro whatever. But that is just, at this point, it's just not appropriate here, and so.
Thank you. And how do our panelists like to be pitched? Do you want it in an email? Do you want a phone call? Social media? My old office, we have a joke: don't call us, we'll call you. Is that still true for the most part?
Gee, I like EurekAlert. I do, actually. It's, you know, we all use it because it's, you know, it's a really convenient place to hear from a lot of institutions at once, and journals. I still look at emails, and I get both general emails from institutions and targeted emails. I never pick up the phone when I see a number on caller ID and I don't know who it is. So I think, you know, oh my, when it's someone calling to say that, ask if you got the email.
Oh, it's death. Oh.
My phone volume is all the way down.
And I don't think that like Twitter and Facebook are really good places to pitch. I think that's the place where you spread the word and tell a story about what your folks are up to, and then, you know, I will pick up on it and follow up if I'm interested.
Yeah, I think email is probably still the best way to go, because you can just attach the most stuff, or if you have a system that lets you include pictures in line, it's probably very good. What's even better is if you get like a nice email that's addressed to you, and especially if you've built a rapport with somebody, it's just that you feel special.
Obviously, I'm going to be a little bit different at BuzzFeed. Like, you could text me at 10 o'clock at night with something that you would share with your friend, and like I would text you back. You could DM me. My DMs are open on Twitter, email. Like, I probably won't look at a press release, but I will look at an email. I know you guys are also busy too, but like if it's something really awesome and BuzzFeed would cover it and cover it well, like just send me an email like, hey, Jess, have time to talk on the phone. I'll also talk on the phone. So like however you want to get the information to me, we're open to it. I've found some of my best stories on Twitter via a DM. A lot of people contact me and say I'm being harassed by my boss, or I witnessed a racially charged tirade at Michael's, for example. The one, I don't know if you guys saw that one. Did you see that one? The woman's like lashing out in a Chicago store about Donald Trump. It's crazy. So we found that via a DM to me, and like it went viral on our page. Our page, like I'm a page manager on BuzzFeed News' Facebook page, and people message us all the time on there and say like, hey, I have a story, can someone talk to me? And if we didn't write back, like I wouldn't have some of my like really great stories that we've uncovered. So we're all about like leveling things and making communication really easy. So any way you want to.
So a lot of what some of us do is research, and not all research is created equal when it comes to news opportunities. So I think Kim from Columbia University would like to share with us one experience that she's had.
Yeah, so I sent in the press release up there. I posted on EurekAlert knowing it wasn't probably going to get much press. It didn't. I did have a visual, which you see is like these genetic data sets that this new algorithm cycles through. It's kind of hard to understand. So the big problem with this story was this algorithm was devised by this guy, David Bly, who's really famous in machine learning statistics. But he's not really good at talking to the press, and you really can't find him on the web. So just putting his name in here wasn't enough of a flag for people, I think. And his algorithm, while really, really interesting to machine learning people, the applications are still very far away, because this is probably for like personalized medicine. And nobody who was on the personalized medicine side of this paper would even go there because it's so far off. So basically it was just a math paper and very hard to sell. So I just thought I would send it in case you guys had any ideas what I could have done better.
Well, so I jotted down a note that I thought, your deck, I guess, researchers apply machine learning tools to infer ancestry mix of individuals. I would have made that the title. Right? It tells me more about what this guy's doing. I think, one of the things that almost every, news org has done is, the things you call clickbait, right? We just want to tell you everything, we have, so you're interested in it. So the less vague you can be with, what this paper is offering, the better.
Yeah, I think you really did, a lot what you could do with that first paragraph, but, graphically it's hard to understand, and algorithms, you explained, that we actually use them all the time, but it's still, and then as you say, well, it's really not clinical yet, and it's really not even preclinical, and I just think that's a toughie unless you want to go to, a more specialized publication like Science or Tech Review or something like that, where you'd have an audience who would be easier to reach. I think this would be a hard sell for us, especially without a researcher who loves doing media and can really tell a story.
I think this one's interesting. Like for BuzzFeed, one of our like biggest frames that we use is identity, because millennials love talking about themselves, right? And they love learning about themselves. And so like identity posts and identity news, it's huge at BuzzFeed. So I could see this not being like a news headline, but you could pitch it to us as part of a post that could be inspired by this. Here's how to learn more about where you came from, or like, we need to talk about your genetic makeup. Like that would be a headline. And like it could be a tiny sentence, but it would be part of it. So that's a possibility. But as a general like solid piece of news that's inspired by this piece, and the headline is unlocking big genetic data sets, like probably not for BuzzFeed, but it could be a part of it.
I guess for me, the thing on the visual, you talk about individuals, but you don't actually show individuals up here. And so I don't know if, picturing this as, instead of it being data sets with slightly different color bars on it and so on, what if it was actually like circles filled with faces of people?
That's a good idea.
Personalize it.
Yeah.
Show off, how the different sets, how the algorithm would help sort people or something, Show off that ancestry, and so on.
Also, I don't know if you guys have time for this, but like if you were pitching BuzzFeed with this idea, it would be like, why would our audience care about this? Or like, what, after reading a piece about this piece of research, would you want our audience to walk away knowing? Like that would be helpful, like those points. I know obviously you're very busy and you don't have time to customize every pitch, but that's something that I would look at if I saw that line in an email from you.
I feel your pain. And especially because I assume that, after you've written this, you're probably gonna maybe in 8 months from now write another one, kind of about this guy and about this program, because now they've improved it by 20%, and then it's a challenge to. I just think that for these kinds of things, the goal shouldn't be earned media placement. That it's you're doing your job. And your job is to be promoting the work of these people, building relationships with them, creating a body of material that is out there that people could find, that can be referenced. Maybe when you find, connecting with a reporter or two who's really owning the space of personalized medicine and trying to make some connection there, but really just taking a very long view of that, rather than this one-off Nature genetics paper or whatever.
The topic of headlines has come up on some of the online questions, and I wanted to pose the question of, I think a lot of times in journalism school, we were told, write a short, snappy headline. Certainly as PR professionals, we're told, make your headline short, subject lines are very short. But we're seeing more and more longer and longer headlines on BuzzFeed, on other places. Laz, you just suggested turning the tagline into the headline. What's the deal with headlines?
Well, I mean, just think about like where people are getting their news, right? Nobody really comes to like a homepage of anything anymore, right? The homepage used to be like the big thing, but now everybody's encountering content in Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat. You're competing with everybody, right? So if it's a matter of how your content looks next to somebody else's content, it's you have a million voices yelling at you, from your phone screen. Which one is the reader going to listen to? And I just think, these headlines, yeah, they're long, and clickbait is bad. Yeah, I agree. But there's no shame in telling a reader or enticing a reader to click on something if you're providing good information. That's my 2 cents, but you probably.
Yeah, totally agree. Like we have landing pages on Facebook, BuzzFeed News' Facebook page, but we find that people don't go to our library of videos to find content. They only look at what's on their news feed. Mm-hmm. Another thing is I'm sure NPR and Washington Post has the same utilization of headline like accuracy and which headline has performed the best. Yesterday I was doing a piece, not a science piece, about a woman who had moved to New York and how she found security and camaraderie and friendship in delivering food to seniors who can't leave their homes. And I was like, what's the Facebook's frame for this? And someone was like, did you see the optimization for the headlines that they chose? And I went to our like proprietary like inner working backend stuff, and there were 17 options that had all been tested throughout the 24 hours the story was up.
Yep.
And sometimes the difference is like by like a percentage point, but that percentage point like could mean 500 shares or however many. Don't quote me on the numbers. But yeah, headlines do matter a lot, and they are longer because people are like looking on their phones, and sometimes that's all they see is like a line and like a photo. So it does matter, and the more descriptive you can make it, the better they're more likely they'll click on it for sure.
I know one of the things that we struggle with is where the news nugget actually lies in a story that we're trying to tell. Lots of times we're handed things from our media relations team and so on, and there's all this institutional ease that's spread throughout the headline, the lead paragraph, the whole 9 yards. And sorting through it, I realized that the actual news nugget sometimes is in the 3rd paragraph, the 5th paragraph, the 8th paragraph, and yet the entire thing was front stacked with, NASA subdivision, of this office used this, this telescope with this team to discover this thing that may or may not really be the thing that's actually the news in this. What's really cool is that, 5th paragraph down, oh, wait, that new star we discovered is now the closest new star that we've found outside of our own, or something like that. That sort of thing. That's not an exact quote, but, that sort of thing is the actual key message, and that's in the 5th paragraph. Because everything else above it was talking about the fact we discovered a new star. Well, what makes this star unique? What makes this star different? And so front stacking that for social media is absolutely crucial.
I think the same goes for like how we build our videos too. So I went to film school. I got a master's degree in documentary film. So the fact that I'm doing like 30-second videos on like how to turn urine into biogas, like kind of makes me question like my whole life and like all of my life choices. But but it's damn fun. So so like in film school, they taught us to build a narrative. Obviously, you all know this. Build a narrative. You can tell a story over a long period of time. Sometimes when I'm making Facebook videos, the punchline is the first thing you see, and then we give a little bit of context, and then we give you another punchline, and then we do exposition, and then we'll show you the same video that we showed you at the top again, and then you'll see it again at the end. So like it's strange the way that we're doing story structure with Facebook videos, and it's literally because we're responding to how people watch. Like we're looking at like the drop-off rates, and we see that when we repeat awesome parts of the video, the drop-off rates go down. So it's kind of weird, but I don't know how that would apply to science research and like pitching and headlines, but that gives you an idea of how we're thinking about the stories we build.
I guess I'll just jump in there on that as well. For when we're producing videos that are strictly for social media as opposed to like traditional television audiences, the first 10 seconds are the most crucial of the entire video because of autoplay. 93% of our videos are autoplayed in people's feeds. What's going to make them stop and watch? And it's not going to be a slate, it's not going to be your institution's logo, it's not going to be a talking head, it's going to be something that's absolutely visually compelling that will make people literally in their feed decide, whoa, what is this? I want to actually stop and stay beyond the 30-second autoplay that it's doing.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think in Facebook, there's a minimum of 3 seconds for something to then be counted as a view, and if you have a video there and you have 3 to 5 seconds of just your logo or your slate, I mean, right away that kills viewership. Yeah, so it should, on that platform, certainly just boom, immediately. But as for headlines, we have this argument all the time about, it's kind of, one thing I've noticed is that science writers love these very kind of opaque, poetic, tantalizing, double entendre headlines, but Google doesn't. And again, going back to what Laz said, if that's people aren't coming to your website and scrolling through the list, things are getting linked and crawled and everything, and so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of good points. It's just that even if you write or if we make some 10,000 word charticle thing, we know for a fact that maybe 30% of people are going to get to the bottom. Like, people are just not reading everything. They're just not. So just put all the good stuff on the top. You know, a lot of it is sort of, you know, elaborating on points, but just, you know, what do you want people to walk away with? And sometimes, you know, the reason for writing good descriptive headlines that tell you what's in the article, and they're long, I guess, is sometimes people aren't even going to click. But if you wrote a good headline that tells people what the article is about and you walk away with some information, that's already a good service.
You mean inverted pyramids actually work?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah, I mean, most people don't go beyond the first screen on a story. So it is, like Laszlo said, it's like, you got the headline, you got your image, maybe they'll read the deck or the first couple sentences, but that's, you know, and it's like ethical clickbait, right? I mean, you're saying something accurate, but you're trying to say it in the most alluring, compelling, interesting way, and that's not a bad thing.
Nope. Just give people the goods.
I'll also throw this out there, be relatable. Please, please, please be relatable. I mean, we had a story that was coming out that we had a science writer that actually made it over into something that was absolutely amazing, and it was one of our biggest stories of 2015, where we had two black holes that were feeding off one another, and they ended up putting a zombie frame around it, and that it was basically the two black holes were, you know, eating each other alive, which was a great frame for it, and that was the headline. And when we put that up and opposed to the press release version and so on, which talked about black hole science shows blah, 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 snooze, you know, that drove all of our coverage because of that creative frame. So be creative, be relatable. Things that people can relate to always win out over things that are a lot more esoteric and kind of, you know, weirdly niche.
Our next pitch came from an online submission. The headline is New Virus, a Prime Suspect in Avian Carotene Disorder Among Alaskan Birds. This looks like a headline that I would have written with some sort of detective mystery air to it. Start with there's exciting scientific development regarding birds in Alaska. Research team, including scientists from the California Academy of Sciences, has discovered a new virus that is very likely candidate, sounds like the scientists got a word in here, for the cause of avian carotene disorder, a disease that results in debilitating beak overgrowth and prevents birds from feeding and preening. There's a little more information here, and it ends with, let me know how I can help. We have many incredible and heartbreaking images to accompany this story. Happy to connect you with our curator and as well as scientists. So how do our panel feel about a pitch like this?
Well, I think mutant killer zombie beaks would work. I mean, seriously, you know, I've never heard of this thing before, and she says she's got images that are incredible. You know, it's a mystery, right, about what's happening to these birds. And if you give me a headline that says there's this mystery disease that's, you know, making these beaks grow like crazy and killing birds with an image, I would read that, you know. But you know, I don't care about it because it's in Alaska. I like Alaska.
Oh yeah. So I mean, one thing that jumped out at me is that they said that they have scientists in the field, or you know, they have like a group of scientists that are trying to investigate this, right? So, you know, to me, reading this, you know, there's a mystery, right? Something's happening to these birds, nobody knows about it, and there's like there's a team of scientists, you know, so you have characters now, right? You know, I think the mystery is sort of the interesting part of this, and the fact that there's this action happening in Alaska that you know is going to have ramifications in the entire world. And I think, you know, like you mentioned, like you like Alaska, but the fact that this is global is a big deal, you know. So lead with that.
So I kind of went through all of these pitches and like marked up how I would write them if I were doing a BuzzFeed post on them. So like one of them is like, we need to talk about Alaskan birds. And like that's a frame that we use about like silly things like Britney Spears does something strange, like we need to talk about what Britney Spears just did, like haha, but also like here's a very serious thing, and that's like what a 16-year-old would text their friends, like we really need to talk about these birds. And then they would have a very long conversation about it, and they might share this piece. Or here's 10 reasons why Alaskan birds might be in trouble. Or like what Laz was saying, these scientists are helping to save birds in Alaska. Like a character doing something.
Anytime you can make it about people, I think that helps.
I could see making a video out of this for sure. Like I'd love to have like user-generated content, like the scientists holding their phones vertically, doing whatever, going and like filming these birds, and like I want to see what they look like. I noticed that on this pitch, we have many incredible, although heartbreaking images was at the very bottom. Like I felt like you could have led with that. Like I have incredible and heartbreaking images about this very sad story about birds that have beak problems. Like I would be like, yes, I want to see them. I might not do a story on it, but I would definitely, if I got this, immediately click on the pictures and like cry a little bit. And also with BuzzFeed, obviously, as you guys know, like we have huge animal content. People love our animal content. It's a way to get people in our orbit so that we can tell them really important news stories. So what you don't know is that we love dogs and we love cat videos, but it's also like a tool to get people to click further into our database of amazing stories. So this is a heartbreaking tale of like birds, and like people like birds too. We did a story about a featherless parakeet, and it went viral. And we didn't know if it would go viral because like birds aren't like a thing that a lot of people have. I don't know. This is a generalization, but our bread and butter is dogs and cats. So
birds are being attacked by their own beaks.
Yeah, totally.
We could go tabloid with this.
Yes.
Really.
Wait.
So I like this one a lot. It's sad, and I'd click on it.
But I second the suggestion to get some kind of field footage. I mean, because Alaska's kind of a magical place in a way. It really excites the imagination. I've never been there, but so if there was footage, video clips of the researchers out there, you could see them do their work. I think that'd be very interesting.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
My institution, I think a lot of natural science research institutions often have stories with, based on things like climate change or environmental monitoring, that their importance relies largely on the fact that it's been going on for year after year, monitoring CO2 levels in the atmosphere or blue crab numbers in Chesapeake Bay, those kinds of things. I'm curious what you would say about how you can pitch a story that's an annual story where you might have a huge spike in blue crabs this year. Next year it might go down, but the scientists are always saying it's just the trend. It doesn't matter what it is from year to year, but they're the same ones who want the story to be pitched. So sort of those long-term stories like you were talking about with incremental, this is more of a time series where year-to-year changes might not make that much of a difference, but they are sort of what makes the story from year to year. Just curious about your feedback on that.
I mean, I can jump in here a little bit on earth science and other stories of that ilk. I always love going back to basics, and it's one of the things that I work in this field all the time. I'm exposed to the research that we're doing, and I always see all the incremental little pieces of it. But I'm able to synthesize all that because I'm paid to watch all of this and to make heads and tails out of it and so on. But the public isn't, and they're not looking at it from this builds on this piece of research from last year, or this builds on it from 2 years ago, or whatever. So go back to basics, tell the story, the whole story, and make it, something that, puts this particular little piece of nugget of new news in context with everything else that's already been, that it builds upon. And I think that lots of times, I see lots of things that are sent to me, at least, that don't explain the basics. And so, I hate to say it this way, but, we would get in this thing about, a new thing that says, you know, the ice in Antarctica has melted to its lowest point this year. It's the annual minimum kind of thing. Well, great, but why does that matter? What's the point? You know, the news, yes, is definitely that, you know, we're at the minimum, you know, the ice minimum kind of thing, but why does the minimum matter, and why does the fact that it's smaller than it's ever been matter? You know, what's the point? So put it in context and provide that longer term view. You know, why does ice, you know, as a kind of a global air conditioner sort of thing matter on Earth here? You know, it helps, you know, ward off a lot of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you know, so think of it that way. Go back to the basics. That's definitely my advice here.
I mean, you bring up an excellent point about, you know, this is normal to you. This is, you know, it's incremental to you, but most humans don't know what blue crabs mean for the environment. You know, we face that all the time in our department, where, you know, we make maps every single day of our lives, and we're bored of maps, right? But something that we may have on our monitor that's sort of banal and, you know, run-of-the-mill for us, you know, may educate or surprise somebody who hasn't seen it before. So I think a good exercise is to approach this sort of stuff as someone who knows nothing about it. Try to put yourself in that frame of mind, and you know, explain the whole process.
I think that's part of actually. Sorry, that's the challenge for me in this case, is that I think I'm doing what you're saying, but it's like I've literally then written the same press release 15 years in a row, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just changing the numbers because what the press release, when I originally did it and didn't have that familiarity, it was like, wow, you know, why is this important? I put all that stuff in there, and then, so it's just like changing the lead about this year was a really good year for blue crabs in Chesapeake Bay, and then next year I'll write, this year was a really bad year for Chesapeake Bay blue crabs, but, you know, you can't use one year.
You're remembering the
right,
you wrote last year, but
I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that I feel sort of ethically challenged that I'm getting press every year for the same story, but maybe that's just the public isn't seeing that 15 years of repetition.
It's a trend piece.
It is,
and, you know, especially if you live in the Bay or you work in the Bay, it's really, you want to know those trend numbers. It's important stuff.
So I can just have a template and change stories.
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of gets
Febreze it, though. Definitely Febreze it, you know, make it.
Something shocking will happen. It always does.
Is Rose in the audience? Rose? So the next pitch that was submitted to us is about a forum. These academic forums, discussions happen on campus a lot, and oftentimes PIOs are tasked with the monumental challenge of getting media for these. Rose, you want to tell us a little bit about it?
You actually just summed up the exact reason why I pitched it, because every year it's a new topic in a new country. So we don't have a media list to build off of from the last year. So this year we're doing all things cybersecurity. So wanted to get your feedback. Thanks.
So I know that for me at NASA, we have a lot of events that we do all over the country, whether it's exhibits or it's seminars or it's, you know, colloquiums or, you know, things like that. And one of the big things that I know that I always stress to people is, how can people be involved? What's the involvement here? What's the engagement? You know, is it being web streamed? Is it something that, you know, someone's gonna be live tweeting from it? Is there, you know, some sort of, you know, folks who are going to be able to, you know, ask questions from a virtual audience, or, you know, take in things from the peanut gallery that's sitting in the balcony over watching the whole thing. So I definitely think that, you know, when you have an event that's going on, you need to make sure that you're feeding people's fear of missing out and tapping into that to make sure that they can be a part of it, and that can help drive coverage, in that, you know, it's almost like an open invitation for others to come and get involved in this particular event that's going on.
I mean, you've got an incredible topic here. You know, what could be more timely? And you've got, you know, two really good, you know, internationally known speakers there. So, I mean, I would put that right up front and say, you know, you could even use the election and our current debate. You know, you could talk about the rise of nationalism, fake news. I mean, there's a zillion different things that factor into this that you could use to talk about digital technology in the information age. that would make it sound much more newsy than just every year we do this colloquium in a different country. And then I love the idea about how you can get people to participate in some way. And whether it's, you know, discussions on Facebook, maybe you could lead up to it, you know, for like a month and have maybe Facebook Live interviews or, you know, discussions on certain points, or come up with some particularly egregious examples from the news about issues of security. I mean, you know, security breaches. I mean, there's just like so much going on in digital security these days. Profiling, you know, privacy. I mean, you could just do something every day if you wanted to build up to it.
I mean, certainly timely, if nothing else. One idea might be also to have some sort of press event or moment, either, you know, before the event or the day before, something that's kind of a direct invite thing where just, you know, maybe one or more of the presenters will sit down just with reporters and have some sort of format discussion, but that's tailored to the reporters themselves. I've seen that approach sometimes yield results.
Yeah, I don't really see this as an opportunity for BuzzFeed specifically to write a story, but since we're a new newsroom, like we've literally only been around since 2012, which seems crazy, but we're still building our source lists. And so I could see this as a great opportunity to entice one of our journalists to come so that they can meet people firsthand, and then tell them what they might get out of it, kind of. Yeah.
The next question is for David. You work for a very established, well-funded, well-staffed organization. What recommendations do you have for new organizations or smaller organizations in doing some of the interesting things?
Yeah, that endowment is the source of more headaches. But that's a really good question. I mean, a lot of the things that we are talking about today are not huge investments. I mean, these are platforms that are universally accessible, and it's ones, you know, there's, what we're seeing here is a lot of creativity and a lot of imaginative reach here. And just, you know, it's interesting if you look at the Facebook Live part of things, you know, if you want to, I was actually just talking to a friend the other day at a university who's starting up a communications team, and she wants to start up a whole multimedia part of it. She's looking at hiring people and, you know, buying all this equipment, and was, you know, coming up with the price tag, and it is a lot of money. But then to do Facebook Live, I mean, it requires Facebook and a phone, and maybe a minimal investment in, like, the Steadicam that I mentioned before. And then what determines the success or not is how creative you can get. But that is not a monetary investment. Help me.
Any other questions from the audience? We have one in the back and then one in the front. Oh, two in the front.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm from the University of Delaware. Jess, you mentioned building your source list. For everyone in this room, you know, in some ways it's, in my mind, just as good to get a faculty member quoted in a story about something that they may or not be related to that's in their area of expertise, as it is to get a whole story written about their research. How do you go about building your source list, and how should we go about getting the faculty that we know are good, knowledgeable, can speak in layman's terms, and can talk about popular topics to all of you?
I guess I'll go first. I mean, it's like pretty traditional journalism stuff, but like in a BuzzFeed way, we like to, like I've been saying, like we like to level that connection, that like wall or barrier between our sources and who we talk to. And I think that just like with any traditional journalism outlet, like having a conversation before you have news to share probably is the best thing. We just recently invested in a reporter in the breaking news team that only covers Muslim American issues. And so, unfortunately, a lot of his coverage has to do with like hate crimes and when bad things happen and a Muslim person might be involved. But one of the things that's been really great for him as a new reporter in a new newsroom covering a brand new topic that I don't think many outlets have is just having conversations with people on a regular basis that have nothing to do with breaking news. So that's like the main thing for me. I think like having those conversations and then talking about what kind of research has been done in the past and then brainstorming over in the future how those sorts of bits of research can be reframed for a BuzzFeed audience. And then just like calling to getting to know each other. I think that's the best thing. I spend a lot of time like going through Twitter and going through Facebook and random research articles and just trying to find who's behind it, and I reach out to that person. But that's just because I'm like a nerd and I like to spend my time doing that, but not everyone does. So I think like there has to be like a two-way street a little bit. So reach out and provide opportunities to get people to know each other outside of breaking news or news items.
Yeah, I think I would be looking for, you know, is this person been published and cited in the field? You know, I'd look at Google Scholar type things. And also, I would probably, if I wasn't that familiar with the field, I would probably check with the professional society that person might belong to see who they would suggest. And I'd also ask other researchers who else would be good to talk to. So I think it's a toughie unless you know that there's a paper coming out and you can say, hey, I've got a person who's not in the paper, but he sure would be a great commenter, or she would, and you could reach out to people then.
We have a question in the middle and then in the front.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hansen. I'm from UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And my question is, you've been talking a lot about how important it is to be credible and trustworthy and authentic and come across as, you know, a serious research institution or news organization. And yet we've also been hearing a lot about how important it is to be fun and engaging. And some of the things that I've been seeing, you know, are even a little silly. So how do you balance those two desires, or is there even a conflict? I mean, does it decrease your legitimacy to put out silly things, if that makes sense?
I guess this is a BuzzFeed question.
That's a question for all of you.
Yeah, this whole thing, I mean, we're a real news organization, you know, but we also don't take ourselves too seriously. And I think like at the New York Times, like I loved working there, but the New York Times takes itself very seriously for a reason, right? And sometimes it's not very accessible for people who are just regular people, but have interests and have desires to learn. So I think what makes BuzzFeed so unique is that we know that there are regular people out there who might not read an article from the New York Times, but they might read the same one on our site because we appeal to their needs. It's kind of like 5 years ago, like communicating with audiences was a huge thing. I think like the CPB, Nancy, who was it? It was like PR, a database where you could like send emails out to like people who had subscribed. Do you know what I'm talking about? No, so there was like this, yeah, you remember? Yeah, the Public Insight Network. And it kind of floundered a little bit, but it worked pretty well. But I think like for us, like we're not trying to like own a database of people and names that we can then email for ideas. Like we're looking to go straight to the source and provide headlines and content and videos that appeal right away and like create almost like a community format instantly so that we don't need to go and find sources later like via the comments. Like they're coming to us because they saw a story. And it just makes it feel so much more accessible. So we will publish a like 2-year-long investigative piece about, actually that's embargoed. So like, never mind. But we'll do a extremely like awesome investigative piece about something, right? And it's gonna come out soon. And maybe it's about the healthcare system, maybe it's not. But like, but at the same time, on the same Facebook feed, we're publishing a Facebook Live video. I don't know if you guys saw this, a plate of warm water and Skittles arranged on the outside of the plate. And over time, the food dye food dye, oh my gosh, comes out of the Skittles and creates beautiful patterns, and that went viral. We also put, how many rubber bands does it take to smash this watermelon? You know, so like we're doing both of those things, and for us, like a 22-year-old isn't gonna say, well, BuzzFeed's making a Skittles warm water plate, but we can't trust them even though they have this amazing editor who's putting out this investigative piece. Like for our audience, it's not that they don't care, right? It's that they know that we can do both and still be credible.
So for you, there's no conflict?
Not for
being
us, no.
content?
And in fact, we got this question at one of our, we have AMAs where like our CEO comes and like chats with us in our canteen, and we have beer and pizza, and we literally can ask anonymous questions and ask him anything. And like one of those questions was, how can we reconcile the Skittle warm water plate with like real journalism? And the answer was like, we're literally doing it right now. And we get like 200 million views a month. And like the New York Times quotes us, CNN couldn't put out a story in the last section of the election cycle without quoting a BuzzFeed article, and then they poached our entire K-File team. Like, we're doing something right for sure. And like the people who are like, oh, BuzzFeed can't do anything, or like BuzzFeed isn't good enough, or BuzzFeed is like too silly, like in my opinion, they're the people that will get left behind. That being said, I'm not saying there's no room for traditional media outlets. I respect them and I look to them often, and that's where I come from. I'm just saying like there's room for both, and like you can consider it.
I guess I'll jump in as well. If you know your audience, you can right-size your message for that audience. And so there's audiences that want it to be kind of fun and lighthearted and so on, and there's others that will completely groan at those sorts of attempts. And I mean, like the example I put up of One Direction, you know, we got tons of feedback from our older audience. It's like, what the heck are you doing? Focus on space, you know? And yet, you know, it was something that was reaching an entirely different demographic than our traditional demographic is. And that's important because that's our pipeline. Those are our future, you know, not only employees, but, you know, that's also our, you know, future, you know, people who are going to be following us on accounts and stuff. So if we could get teenage girls roped in while they're teenage girls, and they keep following us, you know, very few people ever go back and unfollow accounts. They just don't. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And so that's the hurdle you've got to get over to build an audience for yourself, is to get people interested in following you. And so, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you're going to give folks tons of dessert, you know, beautiful space pictures in our instance and so on. But then every so often you slip them a Brussels sprout.
And like you'll see the New York Times for a very long time was resistant to having like a style section and a food section. Like they saw that as like horribly fluffy content, but now it's like a huge major pillar of their coverage. And like they get people to get interested in the New York Times because of this stuff. So my question for you though is like, what do you think, what is the conflict? Like what could the conflict be? What would the conflict, yeah.
I guess, you know, some of those older readers or viewers or whatever might start to think less of you if you're putting out lots of the other kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we're only drawing in young people because it's One Direction. I mean, we want them to be eventually interested in science. So is there evidence that exposing them to science and One Direction will eventually convert them to liking science? And if there is, that's awesome.
I think most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like that's the goal, right? It's not
Right.
like because we think that dog news is the best news and the other stuff is just like, well, what we have to do to like make ourselves legitimate. Like it's like we see that one feeding the other. It's like not taking the devil's money to like do good work. It's like because we get that both matter. Mm-hmm. They matter on different levels though, and like that's okay. We can't turn our noses up at it.
But and it's not just you know, these sort of, you know, examples of whether it's One Direction or fart jokes.
Fart is science, right? That's science.
Right. But there's a range there, and I would just say, you know, maybe for your particular institution and the particular people you have to answer to at the end of the day, I mean, you probably have a sense of how far you can go, and you know, other institutions, you know, NASA, which has this, you know, strong educational outreach, you know, to the general public of all ages. They probably have a big range of tolerance for these things. Other institutions, you know, it's different. But I would just say that any time that you can be appropriately whimsical, or you just, you know, kind of find out where is the limit and just kind of live close to it.
I mean, you're
And
not.
it could be in subtle ways. I mean, even ways you do your videos, ways you kind of do illustrations there. You could use techniques more associated, you know, with other kinds of animation that just sort of add this sort of lightness to it, and it makes it more approachable.
Oh yeah, you can be charming. One of the best animations we ever did was about your microbiome, and it was this lovely thing where, you know, the microbes were like, you know, little gremlins, and they were fighting each other, and it was a complete delight, and people loved it, and they watched it over and over just because it was a beautiful piece of art, and it was adorable, you know. So you can make, you know, bacteria adorable or charming, or, you know, it doesn't have to be fart jokes. And you're not going to make jokes about Alzheimer's research, you know. You're going to be appropriate with it. And I think that's, to me, you know, I love to have fun, but then I always have to stop myself and think, is this appropriate for my audience and the topic, you know, before I go full on, you know. And then sometimes we do go full on and we have a great time.
And I think actually NASA's Snapchat actually it's just a user,
We're
right?
just a user.
That's so amazing. I think your Snapchat channel does a really great job of being charming, being fun and young, but also being super informative. So if you're looking for the middle ground, and also as a side note, like BuzzFeed doesn't go so hard all the time. Like we have charming, intelligent headlines too. But like I think they're a great model of like how to reach the young people while not being too informal, while also trying to reach like maybe their parents at the same time, like a Disney movie that both people can go see. Like I think they win in that area really, really well. So that's a good guide.
Yeah, I will say, second set of eyes on things before it goes out the door is always, always, always recommended. And what I mean by that is, you know, that second set of eyes needs to be someone that you find to be trustworthy, that knows your company or institution's brand value and what it stands for, and also knows how far you can stretch that envelope. Someone that knows those parameters and those boundaries. And that second set of eyes can be such a good kind of gut check on things. Because we've had things where, you know, we've drafted up and we think it's just the funniest thing ever, and we put a second set of eyes on it from someone that had no hand in creating it, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And so based on that feedback, we can immediately right size it to be something that better fits the elasticity of what our brand stands for. So
I think we have one more question front.
My question changed after you talked to her. So, but for PIOs who are pitching to folks like you, is there a danger of us being too precious though? Because I feel that we have a PIO who is the master of puns, and he was a journalist for like 20 years before he became a PIO. And there was actually a lot of retraining for him, because we did have to stop that. Please don't, you're not the reporter anymore, you're the PIO. But, you know, it seems like that line's blurring again, but if sometimes we do pieces that seem, oh my gosh, this is gonna take off, like dog poop in the microbiome. We thought, oh man, dogs poop, it's gonna, and we even used a picture of a dog, and it didn't quite. So, I mean, maybe it's unanswerable, but like, you know, we can't be as precious as you can, or do you want us to be that twee, or, you know?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I would love to talk to a punny researcher. But, you know, again, it's like, what's the research on? Is it appropriate? Yeah, we can have a lot more fun with dog poop than we could with something else. You know, and who are we talking to? You know, I mean, we've done some pretty in-your-face coverage of women's health issues because we know that's our demographic, and wow, you should see the way they dig in and talk about this stuff themselves. So, you know, knowing what your audience can handle and trying to really pitch it just right for them, I think, is the challenge. Yeah, I'm pro-pun. Bring it on.
Any final?
More the individual pitch to you that a PIO does in an email more than maybe what we're going to put up on your EurekAlert, I guess is my question there.
Yeah, you know, we're all in this business because we like news and we like people, right? So, you know, I really treasure those interactions when we can actually communicate with each other as humans instead of just, you know, as sort of robo-news purveyors.
Any final comments from any of the panel? saving it for the cocktail party. On my way to work this morning, a song came on Spotify, and I thought really expressed how I feel about what we do as a community, as science communicators and journalists. From an unlikely source, Kristen Chenoweth. The song goes like this, and I'm not gonna sing. She says, I want to do something that matters, say something different, something that sets the whole world on its ear. I want to do something better with the time I was given. I want to try to touch a few hearts in this life, leave nothing less than something that says, I was here. I think today, more than ever, the work we do as science communicators is extremely important in how our future will be shaped. And so I thank you to our panel and everybody from joining us in person and online. The PIO SAM16 hashtag is getting a lot of spam, so we know it's getting out there. For those of you joining us in person, please join us outside for a reception. And again, thank you for joining us.